Chapter 177. Geoar Chapter 167. Miraculous which Shea thought to himself, no matter what happens in the future, that is a matter for the future. At any rate, if Lao Tzu were to marry a fierce man as his wife, how are they going to live in the future? At any rate, there is no need to talk about marrying you. You should bring your men back to be your leader, then find a suitable husband as soon as possible. After saying that, Shea mounted his horse and said, I am leaving now. I think you should stop wasting your time. This kind of thing, you cannot force it. Cough, cough. After saying that, he looked at the distant elite mounted gangster. Shea frowned and said, If you want to use force, then say it here. Lao Tzu is not afraid of you. Big Sister Fierce Man raised her head and looked at Shea with a resentful expression. That expression of affection nearly caused Shea to fall off his horse. Then, he heard her say in a soft voice, You are the husband that I have chosen in my heart. Why would I want to kill you? If you want to leave, I will not stop you. Shea immediately breathed a sigh of relief and shouted to his companions, Get on the horse, let's go. After saying that, he did not wait for his 3 companions to follow him. Instead, he urged his horse forward as though he was running away. The 4 of them rode for an entire day. In the evening, they stopped by a small forest to rest. At that moment, they were still thinking about what happened earlier and their expressions were strange. Finally, Sharba, who was using a shovel to dig a hole in the ground in preparation for a bonfire, could not hold it in any longer. He threw the shovel aside and laughed wildly. Todoro and Philip did not dare to laugh. However, judging from their expressions, it was obvious that they were having a hard time holding it in. Shea flew into a rage out of humiliation. He raised his horse whip and swung it at Sharba. He said angrily, What is there to laugh about? Sharba's face turned red and he shook his head, saying, Just now I was thinking about it. If you were to marry that fellow, what would the scene look like when you stand together? If you were to give birth to a son, he would probably be born with a palm-sized heart-guard hair. Ha ha! If you give birth to a daughter... Stop! Shea shouted angrily, Shut up! Just say it. If you keep talking, I'm afraid Lao Tzu would have already given birth to a grandson. He threw a pile of firewood into the pit and started a bonfire. He turned around to look at the 3 of them and saw that they still had strange expressions on their faces. Their gazes seemed to have a deep meaning as they looked at him from head to toe. Shea was angry in his heart, but he had an idea. He did not want to be entangled with them, but deliberately changed the topic. Todoro, today when we talked about Merlin, you said that there were 4 things that she was most famous for. During the day, you only said 3 things. Breaking into the Lantis Palace and borrowing the king's crown, destroying the Byzantium navy fleet in a naval battle, and subduing the Byzantium Magic Union alone. Then what is the 4th thing? Obviously, Merlin was like an idol in the heart of Todoro, a grassroots magician. When it came to Merlin, Todoro finally stopped laughing. His expression became serious, and he said with a look of yearning, The 4th thing is related to Odin. Todoro looked excited and continued to tell the legend of Merlin. That was decades ago, a few years after the incident where he barged into the Magic Union alone. At that time, there was a tribe of Odin people who migrated from the Odin Empire. The Odin people were brave and good at fighting, but they were a race that was born like a beast. The bloodline of the Odin people was also somewhat magical. Legend has it that the Odin people were not pure humans, but had the blood of ancient orcs. The beast soul warriors of the Odin people used the souls of beasts to make the warriors go berserk, to find the violent fighting power of their ancient ancestors. Therefore, the skill of beast berserk was also a unique skill of the Odin people. The same sacrificial spell could be used on the Odin people to create a beast soul warrior, but if it was changed to a human of another race, it would not work. It was enough to see that in the bloodline of the Odin people, there was some orc blood in the ancient legends. And because of this, a tribe of the Odin people split off decades ago. It turned out that the natural bloodline of the Odin people was divided into several different kinds of beasts, and when they went berserk, they had different functions. But there was a tribe of Odin people who believed in nature. They believed that the method of extracting souls, cutting them out, and then forcibly injecting them into the warriors to artificially create a beast soul warrior was greatly against the way of nature of the Odin ancestors for thousands of years. They had always been extremely resistant to this method. They advocated that the Odin people should use their own strength to awaken the power in the blood according to their own bloodline, instead of using external forces to force the berserk. The most powerful evidence for this objection was that the beast soul warriors created by injecting souls, although they had a strong fighting power for a while, could not be restored. The berserk nature of the beast soul warriors could not be reduced in battle and could not be restored to their normal appearance. Every time before a battle, regardless of the outcome of the battle, those beast soul warriors would either die on the battlefield. Even if they did not die in battle, after the battle, they would explode and die because they could not suppress the power of the berserk state. In other words, all the beast soul warriors that were created became disposable consumables. Instead, he simply did a generous favor and released an official document, publicly giving Tsanua Cliff and the surrounding land to the Ashwolf tribe to reproduce. This way, the kingdom officially acknowledged the Ashwolf tribe's illegal immigration. If this was the case, it would not show Merlin's power. The key point was that when the Emperor God Odin found out that the Ashwolf tribe had fled to the overseas Lantis Empire, the traditional and stubborn Odin people saw this as an act of complete betrayal. Moreover, the Emperor God Odin was dignified by nature and could not tolerate any offense. He immediately ordered the entire Ashmoon tribe to be labeled as traitors. When the Ashmoon tribe first migrated, in order to escape, most of the first batch of people to escape were the strong and young of the tribe. Some of the old, weak, women and children had no choice but to temporarily stay in the Odin Empire and find a remote place to hide. They wanted to wait for the first batch of people to escape and find a place to settle down before thinking of a way to bring the old, weak, women and children over. However, once the Emperor God Odin gave the order to rebel, the entire country was searched. The old, weak, women, and children of the Ashmoon tribe, who were hiding in the remote mountain forest, were quickly discovered and captured. They waited for the Emperor God's order, and there was only one outcome waiting for them: a massacre. At this time, Merlin showed up. Since the Lantis which said that she would protect the Ashwolf tribe, she actually ran to the Odin Empire. The witch came alone to the capital of the Odin Empire, Odin City, and publicly requested an audience with the Emperor God Odin. At that time, she was already recognized as one of the top contenders in the continent and had a few glorious deeds that spread her name. Therefore, the Emperor God Odin received Merlin. When they met, Merlin straightforwardly asked the Emperor God Odin to pardon the captured Ashwolf tribe members and allow her to bring them to Lantis. Naturally, the Emperor God did not allow it, and the two of them argued on the spot. Merlin was indeed arrogant and simply said, "You Odin people advocate the strong to be respected. Since that's the case, let's have a competition. If you win, not only will I turn and leave, I'll personally capture the Ashwolf tribe members in Lantis and give them to you. If I win..." Without waiting for Merlin to finish, the Emperor God Odin sneered. "You don't have to win. As long as you can withstand my attacks and not lose, I'll let those sinners go." Lantis witch Merlin. She's so famous. When Todoro said this, even Shea's face changed wildly, revealing a shocked expression. What the F***ck? The country bumpkin opened his mouth wide. After a while, he swallowed and muttered, "Ran to the Odin city and challenged the Emperor God Odin to a duel? This witch Merlin is really King Gutsy." It had to be known that the title, Odin Divine Emperor, wasn't as simple as a country's emperor. The religion of the Odin people was different from that of Byzantium and Atlantis. The religion of the Odin people was their national religion. They worshipped many gods, such as the snow goddess, the wind god, the sea god, the god of war, and so on. Among them, the highest main god was the god Odin. The emperor god Odin, in addition to his identity as the emperor of the empire, had several special identities. Every emperor god Odin was considered the spokesperson of the god Odin in the human world. In other words, as the emperor god Odin, he was not only the emperor of the empire, but also the leader of the religion. In Byzantium, it was equivalent to the emperor of the empire being the pope at the same time. In addition, as the emperor god Odin, it was said that every emperor god received the help of the special divine power of the god Odin. Every emperor god was an absolute powerhouse. They were extremely powerful and had the heavy responsibility of defending the Odin in the human world, protecting the influence of the Odin divine system in the human world, and at the same time, dealing with the pagan crusade. Then the emperor god Odin was said to be an absolute powerhouse in every generation. Every emperor god Odin who succeeded the throne could obtain the mystical power bestowed by the god Odin after succeeding the throne. This generation's emperor god Odin had extraordinary strength after being crowned. It could be said that he was recognized as a powerhouse in the continent. No matter how one looked at it, the strength of the emperor god Odin could definitely be ranked in the top 3. Some people even believed that the emperor god Odin was the continent's #1 powerhouse. As an emperor god, he had powerful martial arts. At the same time, it was said that because he had the blessing of the god Odin, he had immunity to most magic. As a result, the strength of a saint-level warrior who was immune to magic was naturally imaginable. On the other hand, although Merlin was famous before, he was still a pure magic-type contender. Moreover, he did not have a precedent of winning against other contenders. Suddenly challenging the Odin Emperor, who was known as the #1 contender of the continent, in addition to having a super strong magic immunity, naturally, the outcome was not optimistic. What was the result? Shea asked with widened eyes. However, as soon as the words came out of his mouth, he realized that he had asked the wrong question. Since Todoro had said so, the result must be that the witch had won again. Todoro's face was full of excitement. When Merlin challenged the emperor god Odin, no one saw the battle between the two. After the battle in a secret place in the Emperor Odin's palace, the two fought for a full 3 days. After 3 days, the Great Witch left the palace with an order personally signed by the Emperor god Odin. Then, the people of the Ashwolf tribe were released. Naturally, there were people who asked who had won the battle. The Great Witch replied, "He can't beat me, and I can't beat him either." The two of them fought for a long time, and in the end, everyone felt that it was quite boring, so they simply stopped fighting. However, he said that as long as I didn't lose, he would release them. Today's second update. There will be an update tonight. Looking for monthly votes. Everyone, please take out your guaranteed monthly votes. Fighting in the monthly votes list is a tradition. If you want to win the world, you must fight at the beginning of the month. If you take the lead at the beginning of the month, you can establish your advantage. If you fall behind at the beginning of the month, you will fall into a disadvantage. Therefore, you can't fall behind at the beginning of the month. Summon everyone's guaranteed monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 179. GOR Chapter 168. Lao Tzu's Turf. Awesome. So King awesome. Shea rubbed his hands, a look of fascination on his face. According to what you said, this Merlin's actions are to Lao Tzu's liking. She should be considered as the #1 expert in Lantis, right? Is she the head of Lantis Magicians Guild? Todoro smiled. Master, you really should learn some common sense. Looking at Shea's expression, Todoro did not dare to anger this master. He quickly said, Lantis does not have a magician's guild. He smiled bitterly. Among the three great powers, Odin's people believe in their Odin's divine tree. Odin is the main god and a group of other gods. However, we view them as heresy. When it comes to religion, strictly speaking, our Byzantium and Lantis are of the same origin. We both believe in the one true God of this world. However, due to the difference in doctrines, Lantis people believe in the Western sect, while our Byzantiums are of the Eastern sect. Originally, we were of the same origin. However, due to differences in doctrines between the two sects, they became like fire and water. They claimed to be orthodox while viewing each other as evil heresy. Due to the differences between the two sects, we find each other increasingly unpleasing to the eye. In fact, we hate each other even more than we hate Odin's heresy. Shea pursed his lips. What's so strange about that? The country bumpkin looked up at the sky and sneered. It's like a family. Two brothers want to split up the family and both want to take the majority. No matter how annoying the neighbors are, once the door is closed, they are still outsiders. At any rate, they will not harm their own family. However, when they split up the family property, if they do not have the upper hand, then it will be a matter of personal interest. So, Todoro smiled bitterly. When the two countries were at their peak, even our Byzantium Church declared that they would destroy Lantis heresy even if they had to ally with Odin. In the past, when the imperial power was weak, the influence of the Church grew, and it affected the political situation of the empire. It even started a holy war and caused several wars between us and Lantis. Let's not talk about that. Shea shook his head. I only want to ask about Merlin. What is the background of this witch in Lantis? Could it be the leader of the Lantis Church? That's not it. Todoro smiled. The structure of the church in Lantis is very similar to our Byzantium. Our church leads the magic union here, and they are also similar. But the difference is that we are called magicians here, and there is also a magic union in the church. But in Lantis, we don't call them magicians. We call them wizards. Looking at Shea's puzzled eyes, Todoro continued. In fact, our magicians, Odin's priests, and Lantis wizards, there is not much difference in essence. Because the religion is different, the name is also different. Although Lantis does not have a magic union, they have a wizard guild, which is also under the leadership of their church. The president of the wizard guild is equivalent to the president of the magic union here. Then this Merlin must be the president of Lantis Wizard Guild. Shea still has the country bumpkin's view, thinking that the most powerful person must be the highest official. Not really. Todoro smiled bitterly. Merlin's nature is eccentric and she does not like to be restrained. Moreover, her relationship with the royal family of Lantis is not very friendly. Her official title in Lantis is Witch Queen. Although she is not the president of the Wizard Guild, the current president of Lantis Wizard Guild is her apprentice. Moreover, she is recognized as the #1 person in Lantis Wizard World. Whatever she says, the Lantis wizards do not dare to oppose. It can be said that although she is not the president, she is better than the president. Shea nodded. Such a character is indeed unusual. Alas! How come Lao Tzu has not met a single one of this kind of powerhouse? In Byzantium, is there no one as powerful as Merlin? In your story, Merlin went to the Magic Union alone and defeated 3 Byzantium wizards in 3 rounds of competition. Doesn't that make the wizards of Byzantium seem too useless? Todoro's face changed, and then he whispered, Master Shea, you can say these words here, but you can't say them outside. Otherwise, if you offend a powerful wizard, they may come looking for trouble. It must be said that Merlin's strength is extremely powerful. However, that competition was about the comprehension and cultivation of the magic realm, not necessarily the strength of the battle. Todoro became more and more excited as he spoke. He sat on the ground and picked up a branch to draw a few lines on the ground. According to the division of ranks, wizards are from level 1 to level 9. This goes without saying. Once you reach level 9, you are a wizard. To obtain the qualification of a wizard, you can't be tested by the Magic Union. Generally speaking, a wizard is considered to be equivalent to a saint rank powerhouse. This saying is generally correct. But there is a difference. What difference? Simply put, a saint rank wizard must be a wizard. But a wizard may not necessarily be a saint rank wizard. Todoro was very excited when he talked about his profession. He shook his head and said, "The recognized standard of a wizard is to have extraordinary cultivation in a certain field of magic. But think about it, the world of magic is full of mysteries, and there are many fields. For example, magic potioneering is considered to be the most basic course that all wizards must learn. But magic potioneering is also a kind of field of magic. If there is a wizard who has reached the peak of magic potioneering, he can also be considered a wizard. But no matter how proficient he is in magic potioneering, he can only deal with raw materials all day long. If it is a competition of fighting strength, he may not even be as good as a high-grade wizard. There was also the attainment of magic incantations. The magic language was a language used exclusively by mages, so naturally, many mages spent their entire lives researching it. Some mages spent most of their energy on researching the magic language, especially on improving and supplementing some of the ancient magic incantations that had been passed down since ancient times. Often, one incantation could be shortened by 1 or 2 notes, or even change the pronunciation, which was considered a great innovation and breakthrough. In history, there was a wizard who made many changes to incantations. Without weakening the magic effect, he shortened the incantation time and changed the pronunciation, making the incantations more fluent and easier to recite. This kind of achievement was also considered a wizard in the field of magic incantations. But when it comes to fighting strength, hee. The last hee was a dry laugh. Shea naturally understood what he meant. He nodded. In that case, it seems that this wizard is not necessarily a saint rank wizard. The saint rank is used to measure the strength of a wizard. Generally speaking, a saint rank wizard generally meets 2 conditions. First, he must be a wizard in a certain field, and second, he must have mastered at least 1 forbidden spell. Knowing that Shea's general knowledge was lacking, Todoro did not wait for Shea to ask and continued. The so-called forbidden spell is a magic incantation that is restricted. The power of a forbidden spell is very strong. Often, a single spell can topple mountains and overturn seas, causing a huge disaster. Once a forbidden spell is used, its power is so strong that it can even single-handedly destroy a majestic city. Single-handedly block an army. In the past, Merlin single-handedly destroyed a fleet of Byzantium's navy at sea, causing a huge tsunami. It was a type of forbidden spell. Once she used such a powerful spell and let the world know, then everyone can be sure that Lord Merlin's magic power has reached the standard of a saint. Then, is there a wizard in Byzantium who knows forbidden spells? Shea was interested. There is definitely one. Todoro's expression was somewhat complicated. Our Byzantium is vast, and the magic civilization is the most prosperous of the 3 empires. There are bound to be wizards who have mastered forbidden spells. Moreover, looking at the history of the Byzantine Empire, the number of forbidden spell wizards that have emerged is also the highest. Today, we already know that there are 2 forbidden spell wizards in Byzantium. However, those 2 are not under the control of the Magic Union. They are even somewhat disrespectful to the Magic Union. Moreover, it seems that in the past few hundred years, our Byzantine Empire, whether it is a warrior or a wizard, those who stand at the peak of the saint rank are not willing to serve the empire. Unlike Lantis and Merlin, although they are arrogant by nature, when faced with difficulties, they are still willing to help Lantis. Our Byzantium. Shea nodded and suddenly remembered the story that Cavashir told him in the old mansion of the Osgilla family. In the past, the last Grand Duke of the Tulip family, Grand Duke Luke, was killed by the imperial family in the palace. At that time, there were still saint-rank experts in Byzantium who were willing to serve the imperial family. However, after Grand Duke Luke's death, the imperial family went against the grain and caused disgust among the experts on the continent. Later on, very few experts were willing to serve the imperial family of Byzantium. Shea did not say anything, but Theodore's excitement did not diminish in the slightest. He continued to talk about some of Merlin's interesting legends with a look of worship on his face. In the end, he sighed with emotion. In this life, if I can become a powerful magician like Sir Merlin, then even if I have to die for a while, it would be worth it. Even if I can't. If I can gain Lord Merlin's favor and have her accept me as her disciple, then… Ha! Shea chuckled. Looking at Todoro, he said mockingly, "You can go take her as your master. Take a boat across the ocean to Lantis, find Merlin, and kneel down and beg her to accept you." Todoro had a strange look on his face. "About that, do you think I haven't thought about it? In this world, of all the living magi, Lord Merlin is my #1 idol. Long ago, I had the idea that no matter how difficult it would be, I would go take her as my master." Shea nodded. Although Todoro was normally a coward, on the path of a magus, he had no lack of courage. He had even dared to roam the anarchic lands by himself. Presumably, taking a boat across the ocean to find Merlin and take her as his master wasn't something he couldn't do. "Why don't you go there?" Lord Merlin did take on a disciple before, but she had a strange requirement. No matter how talented the disciple was, she would only take on female disciples. In addition, she didn't want anyone with ordinary looks. She had to be a peerlessly beautiful woman. Only a peerlessly beautiful woman would be able to gain her favor. Only beautiful women? In that case, that big sister really had been very beautiful when she was young? The four of them rested for a while, then casually heated up some food to eat, then mounted their horses and continued their journey through the night. Just as they were about to set off, Philip suddenly said in a low voice, "Lord Shea, behind us." Shea was startled. Seeing the strange look on Philip's face, as though he wanted to say something, but was hesitating, Shea had a very bad premonition. He turned to look. Indeed, behind them, there was a faint silhouette. A rider was slowly approaching them from behind, followed by several unridden horses. There was a person sitting on the horse in front. From afar, it was that big sister. Shea glanced at her and felt a headache coming on. Why hadn't this fellow given up? She was actually following them from afar? When the big sister caught up to them, Shea, seated on his horse, grew impatient. He said angrily, "Hey! Are you done or not? Why are you chasing us like this?" The big sister sat on her horse and laughed. "Lord Shea, this road doesn't belong to your family. If you can walk on it, why can't I?" Shea was speechless, but he had no words to refute. He could only stare at her and said, "Get on the horse, we will continue our journey." Once they set off, Shea simply galloped at full speed, not caring about the horse's strength. He galloped with all his might, intending to shake off this fellow behind them. But after galloping for an entire night, when dawn broke, he was so tired that he was panting. When he stopped, he saw that big sister was still closely following behind them. This big sister Meng Nan was obviously well prepared. She rode alone and even brought 4 horses with her. Although the horses were not as good as Shea's mount, there were many of them. With a few horses switching back and forth, the horses were full of horsepower. As for Shea and the rest, although their horses were of high quality, they had been galloping for a few days. Their stamina was not enough, and they finally could not shake off the tail behind them. The country bumpkin had no other choice. All men had this kind of mentality towards a woman who was crying and begging to marry him, no matter how much he hated her, no matter how impatient he was, no matter how unwilling he was, no matter how sarcastic he was, he still couldn't beat her up. That would be too unmanly. So, since he could not use force, then Shea had no other choice. He could only rush along, galloping all the way. There were a few times when he should have rested, but he was not willing to stop and rest. In the end, after galloping for a few days, before he could shake off the tail behind them, his horse was the first to collapse. Todoro's horse was the first to collapse. His horsemanship was the worst, and he didn't know how to conserve horsepower. His mount and reserve horse both collapsed one after the other. Shea gave one of his reserve horses to Todoro, but as a result, after running for a day, his own superior warhorse was also foaming at the mouth. It forced itself to stop and rest for a while, but it didn't seem to be any better. It was about to collapse, and it was afraid that it wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. Shea was extremely distressed, especially Sharba, who was also somewhat helpless. He advised, "You can't run anymore. Shea, this horse of yours is hard to come by. Besides, we are cavalrymen. If we don't know how to love our horses, then we should not have done so. Your horse is too tired. You weigh a lot and the weapons you carry are also heavy. Plus, you gave the horse to Todoro. It did not rest during the entire journey. If it continues to run, it will really die of exhaustion." What a pity! Shea was helpless. At this moment, they were not far from Mo Prefecture. After another 2 days of galloping, they would be able to enter Mo Prefecture's territory. At that time, as long as they reached Mo Prefecture's territory, Shea could casually stop at any of the local garrisons and reveal his identity. With his position as Mo Prefecture's military officer, he was in charge of all military affairs in Mo Prefecture. The big sister behind them was nothing more than a large number of horses. When the time comes, each of them could also get 7 or 8 horses to switch. Would they still be afraid of not being able to shake off this tail? Helplessly looking behind them, the big sister sat on the horse, one hand holding the reins and the other holding a bag of dry rations. She was leisurely eating. "Damn it, where is this bitch going with us?" Shea was furious. "Naturally to Mo Prefecture." Sharba held back his laughter. "Shea, didn't you say that you are an officer of Mo Prefecture? Even if we shake her off here, don't tell me she doesn't know the way and can't find her own way?" Shea was so angry that he almost slapped himself. He scolded, "Lao Tzu really talks too much." His eyes widened and his expression changed. Finally, he slapped his thigh. "Damn it, I'm not running anymore. Lao Tzu is going to waste time with her. If she wants to follow, then let her follow. We'll walk when we need to and rest when we need to." Hearing this, Todoro cheered. He was the weakest of them all. After riding for so long, his inner thighs were already covered in blisters. However, he didn't dare to make a sound under Shea's abuse of power. Now that Shea finally relented, Todoro finally shouted a few times, "Master is wise." They stopped to rest for a whole night. During the night, Shea was still angry and didn't sleep well. However, the whole night, he could hear Todoro's cries of pain as he poked the blisters. The next day, when they resumed their journey, Shea didn't blindly gallop and had some self-control. However, with big sister Meng Nan chasing after them from behind, they were able to travel much faster than expected. They actually arrived at Mo Prefecture a day earlier than expected. As an important grain-producing region in the northern part of the empire, Mo Prefecture's landscape was mainly flat plains. Every year, the cold weather in the north and the warm weather in the south intertwined here, resulting in sufficient precipitation. The climate was warm and humid, nourishing the land and making it fertile. After crossing a river, they entered Mo or prefecture's territory. When Shea went south, he had passed by this river with Fatso and Ruhr. At that time, he was alone. Now that he was back, he saw that the surrounding area was filled with farmland. Since it was early spring, many farmers were busy in the field. The newly planted green wheat sprouts were like beautiful green waves when the wind blew. Shea couldn't help but feel a little happy. Damn, this is Lao Tzu's territory from now on. 13,000 words updated on the first day of the month. Alas, my monthly votes are bleak. Asking for help from my readers. A 316-degree backflip in a world of ice and snow begging for monthly vote. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 180. Today's first update. This chapter Qianqian, there will be more tonight. GOR Chapter 169. Riddled with holes, it was the time for spring plowing and busy farmers could be seen everywhere in the field. There were also healthy young peasant girls carrying food baskets to deliver food to their families. They ran back and forth between the fields, their cheeks flushed with health and their bodies wrapped in coarse cloth skirts. The group of four slowly rode their horses forward, and they could not help but slow down. Sharba, the boorish man, followed the style he had in the army and whistled at the young women in the fields. Shea laughed out and said, "You barbarian bull, it seems you are also thinking of spring. Next time, when you get your military pay, you must save it properly. Don't run to the Rouge Street and throw it into the pockets of those whores." Sharba did not care and shook his head. For soldiers like us, we lick the blood of our blades. Out of the 12 months of the year, we spend 8 to 9 months fighting outside. Who knows, one day, when an arrow is shot at us, we will be called back by the Lord. What kind of girl would be willing to marry someone like us? Pausing, a trace of sadness appeared on Barbarian Bull's face. Besides, even if there is a girl that I like, I cannot bear to harm her. Waiting at home all year round, hoping day and night, trembling with fear every day, afraid that the one who comes back is not her husband, but a messenger in the army who delivers bad news. Sigh, look at Uriah. When he mentioned his good friend who died in the war, Shea's face also turned gloomy. He sighed and looked at the bull-like man. At that moment, Sharba's face was no longer as muddle-headed as it usually was. Instead, there was a faint trace of disappointment within his eyes. Shea whispered, "Hey, Barbarian Bull, you seem to be—" Sharba gave a wry smile and his eyes drifted toward a few people walking along the fields. One of them was a tall young peasant girl. She wore a coarse skirt and a checkered scarf on her head. Along the way, several young girls with rosy cheeks pointed at the four men who were walking past them. They were full of curiosity and faint sounds of laughter could be heard. Sharba sighed and retracted his gaze. A hint of pain flashed across his face as he said in a low voice, "In my hometown, there was a girl named Rona. If I hadn't run away to join the army back then, I'm afraid I would have already married her. By now, even my children would be crawling all over the ground." Shea was stunned for a moment. Then, he suddenly laughed and comforted him. "Don't be a sissy. Now that we are in Moore County, I don't think there will be any big battles. When we get back, I will give you a good job. Save up some money and go home to marry that girl called Rona. I will hold a grand wedding for you." He thought that this would be enough to comfort Sharba. However, this barbarian bull shook his head and said with an indifferent expression, "No need, when I went back to visit my family 2 years ago, she was already married." Shea was speechless. He looked at this man who was usually carefree and careless. Suddenly, he did not know what words to use to comfort him. He could only sigh inwardly. Once they entered Moore Prefecture, the group's speed slowed down slightly. This was especially so for Shea. Previously, when they were heading south, he did not pay much attention to the surrounding scenery. However, this time around, He saw that the villages and farmlands would all be under his jurisdiction in the future. He could not help but pay more attention to them. He had been in the army for some time and had naturally developed some habits. Moreover, this time, he was given the position of military officer. Therefore, as he walked past some mountains and rivers, he could not help but imagine in his mind, "Here is a place to set up camp, there is a suitable place to set up an ambush, there is also a certain location that is strategic." Moreover, he couldn't help but feel like he was looking at his own territory. Looking at how rich Moore County was, if not for the fact that it was located at the border, such a rich and productive area would have long been taken over by the warlords before they could even get their hands on it. Along the way, the more Shea looked, the more pleased he felt. He could not help but smile and sigh with emotion. However, when he said something like, "This is my territory," his three companions chose to ignore him. In fact, such words were rather inappropriate. After all, this place belonged to the Empire. Moreover, Shea was only the military officer. Although he was in charge of the military affairs of the county, the head of government was not him. The Empire had another governor here. However, seeing that Shea was in high spirits, the three beside him did not want to spoil his good mood. They passed by a village. This place was still implementing the Empire's century-old agricultural military system. There was a field at the entrance of the village. It was probably used for the agricultural soldiers to practice during the slack period. When they passed by the village, Shea finally revealed his identity. The village's garrison captain was naturally very respectful. However, when Shea asked for horses, the captain was troubled. In this small village, there were horses for plowing the land and pulling the carts, but there were no war horses. It was Shea's first time being such a big official, so naturally, he had a bit of childish vanity. He couldn't bear it and went to the village to watch the farmer soldiers drill. In fact, in this season, spring plowing, the people in the village were busy with farming, so how could there be any drill? Moreover, the Empire's agricultural military system had been in operation for hundreds of years and was close to collapse. Many places had long existed in name only. The agricultural soldiers in the village probably did not have more than 7 or 8 times a year. Most of the so-called agricultural soldiers were just given a spear and then ran a few laps on the field. As for the annual inspection, they just needed to select a few strong ones and put on a few sets of leather armor in the village's garrison warehouse. After that, they would pose in front of the inspection officer and shout a few times. However, the new military chief suddenly proposed a review, which immediately frightened the garrison captain in the village. But seeing that this big boss was so high-spirited, he did not dare to refuse. He could only brace himself and send someone to the village to gather the peasant soldiers. The poor messenger ran all over the farmlands near the village and finally brought back 17 or 18 people with great difficulty. Seeing these farmers, who were wearing coarse clothes used to work in the fields, and some were even carrying fences, hoes, and other farming tools, with their legs covered in mud, standing in a disorderly manner on the playground, Shea stood at the side and looked at them, his eyebrows wrinkling. He was used to being in an elite troop like the Roadrear Cavalier Legion. Even the troops he had seen before were all from the Central Standing Legion. He had a vague impression that the troops of the Byzantine Empire were all like that. However, when he saw the messy soldiers in front of him, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. These people in front of him, not only were they in a mess, but they also looked old and young. The old ones were old enough to be Shea's father. As for the young ones, looking at their young faces, he was afraid that they were still underage. Later, he found out that after hearing the garrison captain summon order, some families refused to send their able-bodied men because they did not want to delay the farm work. Instead, they sent their young children to make up the numbers. The garrison captain also sighed in his heart. With sweat on his forehead, he braced himself and stood in front of Shea. "Sir, this is..." Shea shook his head and looked unhappy. How many people are here? 17, 18. The garrison captain wiped his sweat. Well, are you bullying me because I'm young and don't know the military system? Shea shook his head and said with a dark face, the Empire's agricultural army system. There are at least 100 families in your village. According to the standard of one person per family, the agricultural soldiers in your village should be a full infantry squad, which is 50 people. Why are there only so few people standing here? Sir, now is the time of farming. Most of the families are out to work. I can't inform them at the moment, Shea nodded. He thought for a moment and put on a smiling face. He looked at the garrison captain and said with a gentle smile, Well, I'm not the kind of official who likes to nitpick. I understand the difficulties of ordinary people. Well, I just want to ask you, how many agricultural soldiers are there in your village? Speaking of this, Shea's face darkened. Tell me the truth. The garrison captain hesitated. Although he was reluctant, after all, Renbachian was right in front of him. If Renbachian took it seriously and counted in the village on the spot, his lie would be immediately exposed. He could only grit his teeth and said, a total of 33 people. Well, that's only 1/3 less. Shea frowned. Your village is not lacking in population. Why are you not satisfied with the number? The garrison captain was very unhappy. He complained a few words in his heart, but his face became more and more respectful. He carefully replied, Sir, the number of agricultural soldiers has always been not so strict. I took over as the garrison captain here 6 years ago. My position is considered good. If it was my predecessor, the number of agricultural soldiers would be less than half of the full number. This is because the war zone's military headquarters was set up in Armor County a few days ago during the war against the Odin Empire. We hurriedly pulled in a batch of peasant soldiers to make up the establishment. That's why there are so many of us. I know. Shea nodded. There was no joy or anger on his face. He just said casually, Are the other villages like this? The garrison captain immediately patted his chest and said loudly, Sir, I don't dare to brag. I am, after all, a veteran from a regular army. So, the garrison here is the best in the surrounding 7 or 8 villages. At least, when I am selecting agricultural soldiers, I choose the strongest ones. In some places, even people in their 70s or 80s are pulled out to make up the numbers. Veteran? Shea smiled and looked at the garrison captain. Which army did you belong to? The 6th Corps. The garrison captain puffed out his chest. 6 years ago, I retired from the army. My hometown is here. After I came back with the severance pay, I was appointed as the garrison captain here. Oh, General Ruhr's old subordinate. Shea's face became more amiable. Since he was an old subordinate of the Rabbit General, then he had a good impression of him in his heart. Raising his hand, he said with a smile, Okay, you can let everyone disperse. I was just looking around on a whim. It's nothing. When the agricultural soldiers received the order to disperse, they couldn't help but burst into an uproar. Although they didn't dare to say anything in front of Shea, they had just dispersed. These people were originally busy at home. When they heard that an officer was calling for an inspection, they reluctantly came over. Seeing that this master was young and had only said a few words without looking at them, they couldn't help but feel resentful. A few of them softly cursed in their local language before dispersing. When the garrison captain heard the curses, his face became a little uneasy. He sighed in his heart. Fortunately, this officer is new. Hopefully, he doesn't understand the local language here. What he didn't know was that Shea grew up in Wildfire Town, which wasn't far from Moore County. Therefore, he could understand some of the accent here. He heard the curses below clearly, but he pretended not to understand and didn't point it out. He himself was born at the bottom, so he naturally understood the thoughts of these grassroots people. He also knew that if it were him who was busy with work and was forcefully called over and sent away, he would inevitably be angry. It would be normal for him to curse a few words, so he wasn't angry. It's just that the agricultural soldier system has actually collapsed to such an extent, causing Sheya's originally excited and complacent mood to immediately cool down by 3 points. Although he didn't have a clear idea of what to do, his life experience would naturally affect his thoughts. He had only seen General Adrik in the Rhodian Cavalry Regiment, who was dignified and strict. The entire regiment was as if it was made of iron, and although Rohr's fatso was a little funny, the 6th Corps he led came and went like the wind. Rohr also won the hearts of the soldiers, and hundreds of people responded to his call. He had seen the faces of these generals before, so he naturally had some expectations. He only hoped that after he took charge, he could lead a group of elites like the other two. That would be impressive enough. But now that he saw it, Sheya immediately suppressed the displeasure in his heart and took a look at the garrison depot's storehouse. The storehouse was just 2 rundown wooden huts. In the winter, the wind leaked in the summer, and in the summer, the walls were covered with a layer of mud. As the weather was dry these few days, the walls immediately cracked open. When he stood inside, the wind whistled in through the cracks in the walls. The storehouse was so empty that a mouse could run inside. It was clean. Clearly, someone had occupied the storehouse to live in. As for the weapons that should be stored in the storehouse according to military law, in the corner of the storehouse there were several broken spears and 3 shields. The shields were rusty and the wooden pads inside were rotten. As for the bows, Sheya searched for a long time and could only find 1 arrow behind the door. However, it had been used as the door latch. Is that all? Sheya's face turned ugly. He turned around and stared at the garrison depot captain. With a straight face he said, "There are not enough people. It is during the busy farming season. I accept your explanation. There is not enough training. That is because the current military discipline is lax. You alone cannot manage this. But where did the military equipment in the storehouse go? Could it have grown wings and flown away? Or did you secretly sell it and fill your own pockets with greed? Do not misunderstand. This country bumpkin did not have any sense of responsibility. It was just that since he had become the military chief of the county, he had regarded the entire county's military storehouse as his exclusive property. Damn it! There was actually someone who dared to embezzle his things? Damn it! Lao Tzu did not even have time to embezzle. This was too infuriating. However, while Sheya was angry, the garrison depot captain felt even more wronged. He complained, "Sir, you can't wrong me. I have been the garrison depot captain for 6 years. I have never embezzled a single copper coin from the storehouse. This storehouse is empty. You can't ask me. You should ask the military supply department in the county. Every year, I would report the loss truthfully and ask for the quantity to be replenished. However, year after year, when did anyone pay attention to us? What you see here was from the battle with Odin last year. The military supply department could not bear it anymore. Only then did they reluctantly give us these broken things." With that, the garrison depot captain pointed to his pudding clothes. "If I really embezzled, would I be in such a miserable state?" After saying that, he cried out with red eyes, "When I took over this place, there was only a bundle of rotten wooden arrows and 2 short spears with rusty tips in the storehouse. Even now, there are more things in the storehouse than when I took office. This can be considered a rare occurrence. You can go elsewhere and see if there are more storehouses than here. I will wring my head off and let you kick it like a ball." With that, his temper was aroused. He tore his clothes and revealed his chest. There was a scar on his chest. He shouted, "I have also worked in the Empire's 6th Corps. I hate those rats who embezzle military equipment the most. That year, I fought with Odin and was injured. I also personally cut off the heads of Odin's people. If you think I am not capable, then dismiss me. I have long wanted to quit this sullen garrison depot captain position. Every year, I would go from house to urge able-bodied men to be exiled. I don't even know how many people looked down on me. Once this person became agitated, he was indeed worthy of being a man who had worked in the 6th Corps. His face and ears turned red. Although he was in front of Shea, his immediate superior, he was not afraid at all. Even his spittle was sprayed on Shea's face. When Shea heard this, he frowned and stared at the man's eyes. He said in a deep voice, "You really did not embezzle." Lao Tzu swears with his life. If I say a single lie, Lao Tzu will die a horrible death. After his death, his balls will be bitten by Odin's dogs. Shea looked at this person carefully. After confirming that he did not seem to be lying, he nodded. Okay, I have wronged you. I will go back and investigate this matter properly. I will ask the guys in the military supply department to send you the missing parts. When the garrison depot captain heard this, he did not think much of it. He thought that these officials had beautiful mouth. Lao Tzu had worked here for 6 years and had heard this kind of promise hundreds of times. When had it ever been fulfilled? He did not believe it in his heart, but this kind of country bumpkin did not know how to fake it. He could not help but show it on his face. When Shea saw this, he frowned and said, "What, you don't believe me? I am the military supply officer of a county. When I give an order, I will not lie." The garrison depot captain looked at Shea. He hesitated for a moment and closed his mouth. Shea was a straightforward person. When he saw that the other party was hesitating, he became even more curious. "What are you worried about? Why don't you tell me?" After saying this, he puffed out his chest and shouted, "I am not afraid to tell you that Lao Tzu is from the 13th Corps. He used to be General Adric's personal soldier. We are from the Rodrier Corps. You don't believe me, do you? The general of your 6th Corps, Ruhr, is my good friend." The garrison depot captain finally hesitated for a moment. This time, his expression was much more respectful and his eyes were more sincere. He slowly said, "Sir, since you are from the 13th Division, you are also a good man. I might as well say it directly. I believe that you are sincere. But when it comes to the distribution of military equipment, I think it will be difficult." Shea frowned. "I am the military supply officer. These are all within my authority. What is so difficult about it? Sir, Moore County has a total of 4 cities, 6 towns and 21 villages. Other than the garrison troops stationed in the cities, there are some military unit. I think that although the armory is also in deficit, at least the facade is passable. I am afraid that for the other villages and towns, the armory, it is the same as mine. It is so empty that rats can run away." The garrison depot captain smiled bitterly. "It is easy for you to distribute the armory to me. But once you open the door, I will distribute the armory here. Can you fill the other armory? If all of them are completed, there are about 6,000 to 7,000 farmer soldiers in the entire county. I'm afraid that even the military budget of the county for 1 year won't be enough to cover the cost of the weapons and equipment for 6,000 to 7,000 people." Pausing for a moment, the garrison depot captain looked at Shea's ugly face and continued, "If you distribute the armory, you will naturally need to train them. Since you want to train them, you will need to properly discipline these bumpkins. Sir, you have been in the army before. Training the soldiers will cost money. Food, clothing, housing, all of these will cost money." He laughed in a low voice and said, "I did some calculations when I was bored. If we really want to fill up all these holes, according to the calculation of 3 silver coins per head of weapons and equipment, a barely passable set of leather armor, a spear, a shield, and a military uniform, plus the cost of food for 6,000 to 7,000 people, it would cost at least 3,000 to 4,000 gold coins. but from what I've heard, our Moor Prefecture's annual military budget is no more than 2,000 gold coins, and this 2,000 gold coins isn't even enough to cover the expenses of those local garrison troops. How would there be any left over for us farmers? Shea was dumbfounded. Of the three men who had been following Shea, Todoro was a layman and naturally did not interrupt. Sharba was a boorish person and did not know much about these matters. On the other hand, Philip, who had been listening on the side for a long time, had a slight change in his expression. Hearing this, he suddenly laughed and said, "Sir Shea, this captain's words are reasonable, but this is not the way to settle accounts. You say that my calculations are wrong, then you calculate it." The garrison captain had lost his temper today. He straightened his neck and glared at Philip. I did not say that your calculations are wrong. It is just that the expenditure is not that big. After all, Philip was someone who had led a group of hundreds of warriors. As the leader, he had taken care of the food and drinks of hundreds of people. Naturally, he had experience. Actually, in this sum of money, the weapons and armors are the biggest part. However, these weapons and armors are a one-time investment. After replenishing them, as long as they are not used in battle and are only used for training, they can be used for 3 to 5 years without needing to be replaced. Philip said slowly, "So, the only thing that really needs to be spent every year is the food and drink of the soldiers. The agricultural soldiers do not need to pay their salaries. They only need to pay for their food and drink. Thus, as long as we find a way to solve the problem of military equipment, then the annual expenditure will not be that big." "That is the truth." Shea smiled bitterly. "How could I not know that? But even if it is a one-time expenditure, we still need money. I am afraid that the annual military expenditure of the county is not saved at all. Spending thousands of gold coins at once. I think it will be difficult." There was still a sentence in his mind that he did not say out loud, "unless I pay for it myself." But this sentence the country bumpkin would never say it out loud. As an official, he had already wronged himself enough by not embezzling money. How could he subsidize the government out of his own pocket? What a joke! The country bumpkin would not do that. "Oh, it is not too difficult," Philip slowly said. "There's no need to rush things. Since my lord has this intention, then you can take it slow. First, let's see how much military expenditure is left. Then, select some elite farmers to replenish it. Since there's no war at the moment, we can replenish it this year and next year." Shea was silent and did not comment. Then everyone returned to the field. The garrison captain sent someone to bring the horses of Shea and the others. The horses had already been fed. Shea bid farewell to the captain and did not say anything. He just turned over and mounted the horse and left the village all the way north. After Shea and the others left, the captain looked at the distant back and sighed. "Unfortunately," he said it so nicely, but it seems that he is another bullshitter. Lao Tzu should do what he needs to do. Alas, I was too distracted today. How could I accidentally say such big truths? On the way out of the village, Todoro and the others could see that Shea was not in a good mood, but for a moment they did not know what to say to comfort the master. On the other hand, Shea was sitting on the horse, thinking about things all the way. After running for half a day, he suddenly pulled the reins and stopped directly in the middle of the road. The three people next to him did not expect him to suddenly stop. After running a few steps, they quickly pulled the reins and turned the horse around to run back to him. "That, Master Shea, you," Todoro said tentatively. Shea had a strange look, his eyes flashing, as if he had finally made up his mind. He looked up at the three people and hesitated. "This debt, no matter how I calculate it, I feel that it is too much of a loss. Those agricultural soldiers, even if they are given weapons, what use can they be? You have seen those bumpkins, the old ones are old, the young ones are young. How can these people who throw away their hoes and use their swords become good soldiers? Even if I grit my teeth and give out the ordnance, the agricultural system is already broken. The things given out will be left to rot in the warehouse. If they encounter some bad guys, I am afraid they will secretly embezzle and sell them to make money. The three people looked at each other, not knowing what Shea meant. Finally, the bumpkin looked up with a strange expression. What do you guys say? Why don't I just abolish the agricultural system and more? The early bird gets the worm. Requesting votes. Requesting recommendation votes. Update early in the morning. If you have recommendation votes in your hands, just use them here. You can also climb up the recommendation list a little. Of course, the monthly votes also need to be used. There will be an update tonight. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 181. GOR Chapter 170. Philip's gamble, absolutely not. Hearing the country bumpkin's words, Todoro and Sharbo were stunned for a moment. However, Philip immediately shouted out. He looked at Shea with a face full of panic and shock. Todoro and Sharbo were at a loss. They glanced at Philip. Philip was originally an outsider. Furthermore, he had some past grudges with Shea. Thus, Sharba did not treat Philip well along the way. Even Todoro was polite on the surface. However, he was secretly wary of this former Silver Python Warrior Regiment leader. Now that Shea had spoken out, Philip immediately refuted him. Sharba was the first to feel displeased. He said in a low, muffled voice, "I don't see anything wrong with this. This agricultural soldier system is a mess. Back when I was in the army, General Adric also said that this agricultural soldier system is not good. I think we should just abolish it." Todoro did not say anything. However, judging from his expression, it was clear that he did not agree. Philip sighed. Sharba's questioning tone was very rude. Additionally, the way he looked at him was somewhat unfriendly. His eyes flashed and he hesitated for a moment. Then, he looked at Shea and said in a heavy voice, "Sir, I know that you and the others are prejudiced against me. However, I am now a cripple. Be it for public or private reasons, I no longer have any thoughts of harming you. At this moment, only you are willing to protect me. How could I do anything to harm you? If you fall, where can I find a big tree to rely on?" Shea's expression did not change. He stroked Shea's arm and stared at Philip. "Tell me, what do you mean?" Philip exhaled. Looking at Shea's expressionless face, he suddenly felt a sense of fear. Then, an evil thought appeared in his mind. Why should I point this out to him? He crippled both of my hands. If I didn't expose him and took the opportunity to encourage him to act recklessly, I might have brought him a great disaster. When the time comes, wouldn't I have had my revenge? However, this thought only flashed through Philip's mind. He recalled that he was now a half-cripple and had many enemies over the years. Although Shea had crippled him, he was the one who ambushed him first. Additionally, he was chased by traitors a few days ago. If not for Shea's intervention, he would have died long ago. After experiencing so many things, his mentality was greatly different from before. The evil thoughts in his heart gradually dissipated, and he regained some conscience. He thought for a while and said with sincerity in his eyes, "Sir, you are right. The peasant military system is not good, and it is like a sore on the Byzantine Empire. If we don't get rid of it, it will slowly suck the blood of the Byzantine Empire. The heavy burden and the waste of resources will crush our empire bit by bit. If you want to abolish it, of course I will wholeheartedly agree with it. But this matter can't be done by you." "Why?" Shea was neither happy nor angry as he asked indifferently. The agricultural soldier system and the military region system are two systems combined into one. In fact, they are one and cannot be separated. 100 years ago, the empire set up the Tima system. The two most fundamental parts of this system are the agricultural soldier system and the military region system. The agricultural soldier system's foundation lies in the field. The land used for the field is divided from the empire's territory. The agricultural soldier system uses the field to cultivate the land and use the field to raise the soldiers. They are farmers during leisure time and soldiers during wartime. This is the foundation of the agricultural soldier system. Another point is that the military region system was formed from the agricultural soldier system. Thus, batches of military region appeared in the empire. The military region was set up with governors to manage the agricultural soldier system and the land within the region. It can be said that the financial, military, and political power were all in one hand. Finally, the 54 military region governors were formed. Today's, to say something taboo, today's military and the imperial family are faintly competing as equals. Shea's eyes flashed with understanding. He said in a deep voice, "Go on." "Yes." Philip wiped the sweat off his forehead. "So, the agricultural soldier system is the military region system, and the military region system is the agricultural soldier system." At this point, Philip mustered up his courage and looked at Shea with bright eyes. "Sir, may I ask, after you abolish the agricultural soldier system in Moore County, what will happen to the land that was originally turned into fields?" "The land will naturally belong to the county and be distributed to the local farmers to cultivate. It will be distributed according to the country's lease," Shea quickly said. "Good. That's not a big deal. As for the land, it was previously cultivated by the agricultural soldier system. Obviously, letting them put aside their identity as agricultural soldier system and cultivate as pure farmers is not a big change." At this point, Sharba, who was beside Philip, said with dissatisfaction, "It's not a big change in the first place. It's just a change in name. I think those bumpkins can't be considered soldiers at all. They're just a bunch of farmers." "It's just a change in name," Philip sneered. He saw that Shea seemed to take his words very seriously. Facing Sharba's criticism, he had the courage to go against him. He slowly said, "But do you know that sometimes a name is the key to everyone fighting for it?" After he retorted Sharba, he looked at Shea and bowed. "Sir, I just said that the agricultural soldier system is the military region system, and the military region system is the agricultural soldier system. If the agricultural soldier system is disbanded and the land is returned to the country, then where do you put the military region system? Without the land and the agricultural soldier system, there seems to be no need for the military region system to exist. Since the military region can be disbanded, then shouldn't those governor-general's families also be dismissed and retired?" Shea was startled. He lowered his head and frowned. Theodore suddenly interjected, "But we're only abolishing the peasant military system in Moore Commandery. Moore Commandery isn't a military region, but an administrative region directly under the jurisdiction of the Empire's central government. There's no military governor here in the first place. Abolishing it is a matter of our commandery." Philip shook his head and looked at Todoro with disdain. "This is a hole." He looked directly at Shea's face and took a deep breath. "Sir, if you don't believe me, then please think about the simplest question." "What question?" "You saw the drawbacks of the agricultural soldier system, but others are not blind. I think the Prime Minister of the Empire, the current Emperor, and the wise man beside the Emperor, Cavashir, are not ignorant people." Philip said coldly. "Don't they want to dig out this rotten sore? If it's that simple, abolishing the agricultural soldier system in the administrative region of the Empire will not harm the position of the military region governor. Is it really not harmful?" Shea was speechless. Was it really not harmful? Was it really not harmful? Perhaps even a 3-year-old child would understand the nature of it. Everything was difficult at the beginning, but once there was a beginning, there would be a follow-up. This was a hole. Once the hole to abolish the agricultural soldier system was opened, what would it mean to the large number of warlord henchmen? It would mean that the imperial family had finally made their move. This was a matter of name. Since the agricultural soldier system could be abolished, then the military regent system could also be abolished. Therefore, the warlord henchmen would never allow the imperial family to agree to abolish the agricultural soldier system, even if it was only in a remote county, because they were very clear that this hole could not be opened. What if Shea really wanted to use force? If he really did that and forcefully abolished the agricultural soldier system in Moore County, then the emperor would laugh until he woke up from his sleep. He would love this country bumpkin to death. But then, Shea would definitely become the public enemy of the warlord henchmen. In the past, he was quite disliked by the military, but it was only because he was not pleasing to the eye that they occasionally gave him a hard time. But if he dared to go against the law and abolish the agricultural soldier system, then it would be tantamount to digging up the roots of the warlord henchmen to settle down. How could the warlord henchmen tolerate him? From now on, Shea would be an irreconcilable enemy in the eyes of the warlord henchmen in the 54 Tima military district of the Empire with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Even if Shea really did that, perhaps the emperor would not be grateful to him. Instead, he would think that he had stirred up a hornet's nest. Once he provoked a strong counterattack from the warlord henchmen, it might lead to a rebellion. This was definitely not an impossible matter. Shea pondered for a while. Dora's cold voice sounded in his mind. This guy is right. You country bumpkin, you should use your brain more. Then what should I do? Shea frowned. I thought it was a cushy job, but before I even took up the post, I found that there are thousands of mouths here waiting to be fed. Lao Tzu doesn't want to lose everything he has. He was not asking Philip, but subconsciously asking Dora in his mind. After he said it, Shea realized that he had made a mistake. When Philip saw Shea asking, he thought that Shea finally valued his opinion and asked him for advice. He hesitated for a moment, looked around, and saw that there was no one in the wilderness. He lowered his voice and said, "Sir, since you can't abolish it, why not learn from those military governors?" These words were completely heart-wrenching. When Philip said these words, although his expression was calm, his back was drenched in cold sweat. He was taking a risk to win Shea's attention. Since he had made up his mind to rely on Shea's protection, he was naturally worthless in terms of martial arts as a cripple. The only thing he could bring out was the knowledge and experience he had accumulated as the leader of the Silver Python warriors for many years, and his cunning thoughts. Learn from the military governors? Learn from those warlord henchmen? This was a blatant attempt to sow discord between Shea and the royal family. When he said this, Philip's breathing quickened. He was afraid that in the next moment, the man in front of him would suddenly pull out his sword and shout, "I am a loyal subject of the Empire. How dare you sow discord between my loyalty to the Empire?" and then cut him down with his sword. If it were someone else, Philip would not dare to say such a thing even if he was beaten to death. But after secretly observing along the way, it seemed, this Sir Shea did not seem to have much respect and loyalty to the central government of the Empire. Philip was taking a gamble. If he won the gamble, Shea would look at him differently in the future, or at least treat him as half of his own people. If he lost the gamble, as a cripple, what else could he not afford to lose? Summoning monthly votes. I'm currently ranked 9th, but I'm only a few dozen votes away from the top few. Just a few dozen votes and I'll be able to jump up a few ranks. Everyone, please take out your guaranteed monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 182. Author's Note: I was delayed by some matters today, so the update is a little late. Please forgive me. Chapter 171. Grimm's Chaos. Sure enough, Shea only chuckled a few times after hearing Philip's words. His strange gaze swept over Philip's face. Then, he raised his horsewhip and swung it down. He sneered and said, "You bastard, don't try to pry into my thoughts. I am not stupid. Learn from those governors? Humph, Lao Tzu is now just an armaments commander. He does not have any political power in his hands. How can he be a warlord?" After saying that, he ignored the strange expression on Philip's face. He swung his horsewhip and galloped down. Sharba gave Philip a displeased look and snorted. "You are talking nonsense. You have angered Shea. If you speak nonsense again in the future, be careful that Lao Tzu will break your bones." Todoro also gave Philip a glance. Without saying a word, he gave chase. Philip was the last to fall. His face was cautious, but he sneered in his heart. "Humph, these two fellows, one is a brute and the other is a shrewd businessman. Neither of them have any real knowledge. This Shea does not have any talents under him. As long as I can do my best to gain his trust, there is no need to worry about not having a way out." The three of them continued on their way. Shea did not mention a word about the agricultural soldier system. Along the way, they came across villages and towns. He was no longer in the mood to inspect them. He hurriedly asked for a few horses and continued on their way without stopping. What made Shea curious was that when they reached the end of the run, he would occasionally stop to look behind him. However, he did not see the big sister who was tailing them. This made Shea feel relieved. He was also surprised. Could it be that she retreated in the face of difficulties? That would be the best. The four of them were travel-worn. First, they arrived at Mesta, the capital of Moore County. Mesta was the most populous city among the 4 cities and 6 towns in Moore County, with a permanent population of more than 30,000. Adding in the traveling merchant groups and the scattered people who were looking for a living in this small border county, the city's population was maintained at around 50,000 all year round. Geographically speaking, Mesta was slightly further from the border, so it was the safest city in Moore County. Because of its geography, Mesta was surrounded by mountains on one side and flat plains on 3 sides. The land was fertile and was the center of a rich grain-producing area. Every year, grain merchants from all over the continent would come here to purchase grain and sell it out, thus stimulating the vitality of the city. The grain trade led to other industries in the surrounding area, especially the transportation industry, which was the most developed. Most of the businesses in the city were carriages, which in turn led to the horse market and livestock trade. At the same time, the wood industry needed to make carriages gradually prospered, and craftsmen from the surrounding areas gradually gathered in the city. The current governor of Moore County, Corinthia, was 46 years old this year. He was a standard mid-level official of the empire and didn't have a noble title. He only had the title of Jazz. The lowest noble title didn't have a fief and was only a title of honor. Shea had read the man's information before he came. The governor of Corinthia had been in Moore for 7 years and hadn't moved from his position. The evaluation of him in the information he had read was that he was cautious and reliable, and his abilities were on point. At the same time, he was also an official who was staunchly loyal to the imperial family. He had stayed in this small border county for 7 years and had experienced the war with the Odins. In any case, the imperial army had gathered at the border, gathered provisions nearby, and ensured that the military supplies were supplied without any mistakes. In any case, the ability of this county governor was worthy of affirmation. After the war with the Odins, various final decisions were made regarding this war. Those who deserved to be rewarded would be rewarded, and those who deserved to be spanked would be spanked. However, this official who had painstakingly provided provisions during the war did not receive any benefit. It was clear that this county governor's backing was not strong. Otherwise, being an official in a small border county so close to the border and being the first to bear the brunt of every war, he had to provide food for the army and work in fear. Every war, Moore County was the frontline war zone, and the war zone's military headquarters were all located there. The bigwigs from the military headquarters in the imperial capital naturally wouldn't spare a glance at a small border county governor. Instead, he had to do his best to serve those bigwigs. Therefore, being the governor of Moore County wasn't a good job in the eyes of the imperial bureaucrat. It could be said that he suffered and didn't gain any face. After working for 7 years without moving, Lord Crincia would probably die of old age in this position if nothing unexpected happened. When Shea arrived at Metter, he didn't see the governor of Crincia. He only saw a few civil officials in the governor's mansion. After asking, he found out that Crincia had gone to the countryside to inspect the progress of the spring plowing. This instead made Shea have a good impression of this county governor whom he had never met before. No matter what, a local governor can attach so much importance to agricultural affairs. Instead of staying in the bustling city to enjoy life, he ran to the countryside to inspect agricultural affairs. He can be considered as a dutiful person. Of course, Shea didn't think that the governor was deliberately making him lose face. He had been rushing all the way and the governor didn't know when he would arrive. Based on the normal time, Shea should arrive after a month. Therefore, Shea's arrival surprised the officials in the governor's mansion. Why was the military governor in such a hurry? Was something big going to happen again? Metter was the capital of Moore County and the administrative center of the county. However, Shea didn't have the fortune to stay in this bustling and stable city to enjoy his life. He had to go to Denzel City to take up his post. Throughout history, the power structure of the imperial government was divided between military power and political power. In Moore County, Crincia was in charge of politics while Shea was in charge of the army. Moreover, there was an unwritten rule in the imperial government. The administrative center of the military affairs was generally not in the same place as the administrative center. This wasn't a legal provision, but an unspoken rule. Originally, the garrison of Moore County was set up in Denzel City. It was moved there temporarily to deal with the war with Odin's men. This time, Shea was not only given the position of military governor of Moore County, he was also given the position of military governor of Denzel City. In other words, even though the administrative matters in Moore County had to follow the orders of the governor of Crincia, in a small city like Denzel City, Shea had full control over both military and administrative matters. Additionally, the order given by the higher-ups was also very clear. It was a hint for Shea to set up the garrison in Denzel City. It was the empire's custom for the military chief of a county to also be the administrative chief of the county's reserve court. Moreover, according to this custom, as long as Shea went to Denzel City to take office, the county governor wouldn't care about the matters of Denzel City. As long as Shea didn't raise a flag to rebel or do anything that would incur the wrath of the heavens, the county governor would generally turn a blind eye to him. As long as he handed over the taxes, even if he played hide-and-seek with the people of Denzel City behind closed doors, Corinthia wouldn't interfere. At first, Shea did not understand much about the administration of the imperial court. However, Philip took the opportunity to explain it to Shea along the way. The more Shea listened, the more he frowned. In the end, he could not help but take a few more glances at Philip. He thought to himself, this fellow is quite knowledgeable. The people around me are all brutes who are used to killing. This Philip was once the leader of a warrior group and did not do too badly in the past. He must have some tricks up his sleeve. After asking, Shea finally found out how many soldiers he had under his command as the military governor of the county. According to the imperial military system, A county's full military strength was a mixed emblem regiment of the garrison army. As the military governor of the county, Shea was also the flag bearer of the emblem regiment. The emblem regiment of the garrison army should have a full military strength of 3,000 men. The so-called mixed emblem regiment was a mix of infantry and cavalry. It was not as strict as the central standing army. On paper, the military strength was distributed as follows. There were 6 battalions of soldiers and each battalion had 350 men. There was a total of 2,100 men. Other than that, the emblem regiment also had support troops such as transportation and logistics. There was a total of 900 men. These 900 men included a transportation battalion and an auxiliary battalion. The transportation battalion was in charge of logistics and transportation. As for the auxiliary battalion, they were equivalent to miscellaneous soldiers. They were in charge of building fortifications, building barracks, repairing city walls, and so on. Of course, this was only the data on paper. If one were to calculate it in real life, it would not be that much. Firstly, due to the collapse of the military peasant system and the Tema military district system, half of the empire's land had been divided up by the military districts. The central government's finances were tight. These military districts only paid a symbolic tax and were basically equivalent to a small warlord country. The central government of the empire had lost half of its land, which meant that it had lost half of its financial revenue. With the tight finances, the military expenditure was naturally lacking. As for the garrison army, due to the lack of military expenditure, it was very rare for them to have a full military strength. Therefore, even though Moore County was located at the border, the emblem regiment of the garrison army was maintained at about 70% of its strength throughout the year. And this 70% was only on paper. In the past, there had always been some of the traditional drawbacks in this kind of miscellaneous army, which was to eat empty space and drink the blood of the soldiers. The emblem regiment that Shea had taken over only had 2,000 men. There were 4 battalions of soldiers. One of the battalions was stationed in the capital, Meta City. This battalion stationed in the capital was actually considered to be out of Shea's control. This was also a practice in the officialdom. The arrival of a military officer was equivalent to giving a city to the prefectural governor. This meant that the prefectural governor would have one less territory. In exchange, the battalion stationed in the capital would also be considered to be under the prefectural governor's control. 1 battalion in exchange for a city. No one could say that this was a loss. This was the custom of the officialdom, so Shea could only pinch his nose and accept it. But the problem was that the remaining battalions, the transport battalion and auxiliary battalion, were not enough, and the remaining 3 battalions were far from enough. The 3 battalions should have around 1,000 men. However, the actual number of men would be around 500 to 600. The remaining heads were only names that existed on paper. If one were to really look for them, it would be a wonder if one could find any of them. Only the annual military pay and the empty military pay would naturally flow into the pockets of the lower and middle-class officers in the local garrison army. In some places where it was more serious, some battalion officers who had some influence in the local area would even have their relatives, friends, aunts, servants, chores and cooks registered in the military roster and counted as the heads of the soldiers. It could be considered that the country was spending money to support his family every year. As for the remaining 500 to 600 heads, they had to be carefully selected to eliminate the old, weak, sick and disabled. Based on the elimination rate of 50%, it would be considered good if they could take out 300 people in the end. After this round of accounting, Shea sighed. Damn it, I really thought that this was a lucrative job. After all this time, Lao Tzu only has 300 men who can fight. 300 men is equivalent to being demoted to battalion officers. After accounting for the bad debts, there would naturally be benefits. As the military officer of a county, the farmer soldiers of the county would be under his management. He could also take a portion of the income from the farmlands to supplement the military expenditure. Additionally, the local security, patrol, tax, prison and so on would all be under his management. There were 4 cities, 6 towns and 21 villages in Moore County, with a population of around 400,000. Theoretically speaking, if the farmer soldiers of the county were to be mobilized, it was entirely possible to form a troop of tens of thousands of soldiers. The farmlands would be owned by the country and the income would be used to feed the soldiers. Every year, there would be some savings for Shea to supplement the military expenditure of the local garrison army. In addition, there were also the security, patrol, prison and tax, all of these were highly profitable. In short, all those who were armed within Moore County were under Shea's management. After spending half a day in Mestari, Shea handed over some documents in the county governor's mansion in exchange for a county's military account book. Then, he led his men to Denzel City to take up his post. At any rate, there was still some news which comforted Shea quite a bit. Mad Dog Green had taken up his post a few days ago as a battalion officer of the Moore County's local garrison. The county governor of Corinthia had originally received Green and, knowing that Green was a very talented person in the military, had wanted to keep this talented person in Mestari and ask him to lead the battalion in Mestari. However, Green had politely declined and insisted on taking up his post in Denzel City. Although Corinthia was a local official, he knew a little about the political situation of the empire. He knew that Green was a member of the Eagle faction of the empire's military. Clearly, this Eagle faction member had come all the way to this small border county to partner with Shea. From the looks of it, this Sir Shea was also someone highly regarded by the Eagle faction. Having guessed this, he naturally did not stop Green from taking up the post. Green had already gone to Denzel City 10 days ago to take over a battalion. With this talented person, who was publicly acknowledged by the Eagle faction as having the potential to become a famous general, presumably, the military affairs in Denzel City had already been reorganized by him. Shea was anxious and could not wait to leave Mestari and rush to Denzel City with his men. Denzel City was the city closest to the border. It took an entire day to travel from Mestari to Denzel City on horseback. This was Shea's second time coming to this small border town. They had been rushing through the night and by the time they reached Denzel City, it was already morning. Although everyone was somewhat tired, under the morning sun, the outline of the walls of the small town gradually became clearer. The walls, which were built according to the standards of a military fortress, seemed to be sprinkled with gold under the morning sun. The Empire's eagle flag fluttered on the distant walls and the fields on both sides were still shrouded in the morning fog. Seeing this, Shea could not help but feel excited. On one hand, he would be able to see Green soon. On the other hand, looking at this bustling small town that he had seen before, he could not help but feel fervent. In the future, this will be Lao Tzu's lair. The 4 of them galloped along the road and arrived at the small town. They raised their heads and looked at the walls. The 11-meter-tall walls were majestic. Because it had just experienced the war with the Odin, the walls had just been repaired and looked majestic and sturdy. Although it was early morning, because this was the border trade route, the city gate was already crowded with passing caravans waiting to enter. Taxis after taxis blocked the city gate, and there were also foreigners shouting noisily with accents from all over the world. Many of them were wearing exotic clothing, and there were also some who were obviously Odin's people. At this moment, the 2 countries had just fought a war, and these Odin merchants dared to do business in Byzantium. It was enough to show that they were bold. However, the people around the Odin merchants all stayed far away. There were even some locals who looked at them from afar and spat fiercely. Shea looked at the congested city gate and frowned. There were so many people lining up to enter the city. Why was the speed at which they were allowed to enter the city gate so slowly? Relying on his tall and strong body and Sharba's strength to open the way, he quickly squeezed to the front of the crowd. When he saw this, Shea was instantly enraged. Although the city gate was wide open, there were two sharp wooden horses that were moved out from the barracks and blocked half of the area under the city gate. Below the city gate, there were dozens of city guards dressed in local garrisons standing there lazily. Every one of them had a mischievous smile on their faces. Two of the older officers were sitting in front of a table. One of them had a greedy look on his face, while the other had a shifty-eyed look on his face. Every passing merchant group had to register before entering the city. This was in accordance with the Empire's laws. However, these fellows were clearly profiting from public interest. Two officers sat there with arrogant expressions. One of them was playing with a horsewhip, while the other was holding a mimeographed seal. These two officers were responsible for verifying the passage documents of the caravans passing by the Chamber of Commerce before letting them pass. However, Shea's face turned ashen as he watched from the side. These two bastards only sat there and glanced at the documents that were handed to them. They didn't even bother to verify them. Instead, they pretended to be arrogant and nitpicked at everything. The caravans passing by were used to traveling all over the world. How could they not understand the meaning behind this? Someone went up and used the excuse of handing over the documents to hide something hard and shiny in his sleeve and secretly stuffed it into the officer's hand. These city guards were very straightforward. They waved their hands and let those who paid the bribe pass. Those who refused to pay the bribe would deliberately make things difficult for them and detain their caravans. A group of soldiers immediately pounced on the caravans like wolves and tigers. They carefully checked the caravans one by one. Some of the packed goods were also rummaged through. As a result, the speed at which the caravans were allowed to pass was naturally much slower. Seeing that the city gate was blocked, the anxious caravans behind began to complain. No one dared to scold these greedy officers and soldiers. They could only scold those who didn't know what was good for them and refused to hand over the bribe. The surrounding area was filled with curses and voices. After watching for a while, Shea couldn't bear to watch any longer. He squeezed through the crowd and rushed forward. He saw a caravan leader wiping his hands while trembling as he hid a few hard coins in his sleeves and handed them over. Shea stepped forward and pressed down on the merchant, pulling him back. He stood in front of the table and looked down coldly at the two officers sitting there. The two officers were about to take the money when they suddenly saw someone squeezing in front of them. They frowned. One of them looked up at Shea and saw that Shea's expression was cold. There was a faint sense of coldness in his eyes. He felt a chill in his heart. After all, Shea was a person who had experienced war. His strength was not ordinary, and he had killed his way out of piles of corpses several times. At this moment, when he was angry, he naturally had an awe-inspiring might. Looking at him, he already had a bit of the former domineering General Adric's style. What are you doing?" One of the officers shrunk his neck, but when he saw that he was surrounded by his subordinates, he couldn't help but toughen up. "We're entering the city," Shea snorted. "Line up behind." The officer frowned and raised his chin. "Quickly move to the side. If you dare to disturb the order, I'll arrest you." For the sake of convenience, Shea didn't wear armor. Instead, he wore a robe. Otherwise, if he showed off his armor, these officers wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous. Disturb the order? Shea was furious. He suddenly stepped forward and pressed down on the table with both hands. He lifted the table up. The officer cried out in alarm. With a bang, the table smashed down on one of the officers. The other officer scrambled to the side. He rolled on the ground, his face covered in dirt. Before he could get up, he saw his comrade being pressed under the table. His face was covered in blood. He immediately screamed, "Men! Arrest! Arrest him! Arrest him!" Dozens of soldiers immediately pulled out their weapons and surrounded them. Looking at these people, They were all smiling mischievously. They looked like street thugs and didn't look like soldiers at all. Seeing this, Shea's anger flared up. He casually grabbed the necks of the two soldiers who were rushing towards him and lifted them up, and threw them far away towards the city wall. Bang! Bang! The two rogue soldiers smashed into the city walls. Who knows how many of their bones were broken? They fell to the ground and rolled around while coughing out blood. Beside him, there were some people who rudely raised their swords and rushed over. Some of them were simply ruffians who wore military uniforms to make a living. Seeing Shea acting so rudely, they only hid behind and shouted to scare him, not daring to step forward for a while. Shea didn't care about that. He charged into the group of rogue soldiers and punched and kicked them. In just a few moments, he had taken down 7 or 8 of them. Thankfully, he was merciful and didn't kill them. Even so, these people still had their legs broken. The rest of them shouted and threw down the weapons in their hands. Like a swarm of bees, they scattered into the city. As they ran, they shouted, "Bandits are attacking the city! Run!" Shea was so angry that he nearly vomited blood. This is Lao Tzu's lair? This is Lao Tzu's army? Mad Dog Green, you've been here for so many days. What the hell are you doing? Seeing that Shea had single-handedly defeated dozens of soldiers guarding the city gate, the merchants and passers-by who were waiting to enter the city suddenly cheered loudly. For a moment there was a clamor. Some shouted, "Well done!" and some shouted, "This group of bastards should be killed with a knife." 2 old and wise men walked over and quickly pulled Shea back. They kindly advised, "Young man, run. You've poked a hornet's nest. When they gather people, you'll suffer." Shea snorted and thanked them for their kindness. He gritted his teeth and said, "Are all the soldiers in this city such bastards?" The merchants next to him frowned and complained, they weren't so arrogant in the past. Although we'd occasionally reap some benefits, we could still make a living. But a few days ago, Sir Green came. I heard that this Sir came from Osgilla and has a strong background. After Sir Green came, he became even more aggressive. All the ruffians and scoundrels on the surface were recruited into his army. These people made the city a mess. They even set up checkpoints at the city gates and openly asked for bribes. We were angry, but we didn't dare to say anything. At this moment, the other battalions stationed in the city saw that Green had made a fortune. They all followed suit and colluded with Green. Both of the city gates were like this. These rogue soldiers are even more ruthless than bandits. When these words were said, it immediately attracted the agreement of the people around. For a moment, the crowd was furious and the city's garrison soldiers were cursed and scolded. Shea was surprised when he heard this. Green, that mad dog Green, the one who saluted silently in front of the statue of the Duke of Osgilla, the strict soldier who didn't fear the nobles. Why did he become so unbearable the moment he left the imperial capital and came here? Could it be that the spirit he showed in front of him was all an act? Shea was furious. He went forward and grabbed the officer who was smashed on the ground. He lifted him up and shouted, "Speak! Which battalion are you from? Who is your commanding officer?" The officer spat out blood. Under Shea's pressure, his legs were already trembling. He stammered, I'm from the 1st Battalion. The commander of the battalion is Sir Green. Damn it!" Shea threw him to the ground. His heart was burning with anger. At this time, he suddenly heard a clamor from the city. Footsteps were heard and a group of soldiers rushed out. They were holding swords and weapons. The leader was a tall and thin warrior wearing the leather armor of a battalion officer. It was Green, who he hadn't seen for a long time. Green was wearing a military uniform. He was different from the depressed soldier he had seen in the imperial capital. His whole body was bursting with a threatening heroic spirit and vigor. Seeing Shea from afar, Green laughed heartily, turned around and shouted, "Put away your weapons! Ha 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 ha!" There was a kind person beside him who hurried to persuade Shea in a low voice. Quickly run. This guy is very powerful. Shea stood there, his eyes fixed on Green. Green strode forward and opened his arms to hug Shea. Shea dodged to the side and coldly glared at Green. He gritted his teeth and said, "Green, what a mad dog. You've been here for so many days and you've done so damn well. Lao Tzu has just arrived and he's already seen your methods." Green's expression didn't change. He smiled slightly and shouted at the rude and unreasonable soldiers behind him. "Behave yourselves and don't be rash. This is our new military chief, Baron Shea. Put away your fucking weapons and come forward to salute." When these words came out, there was a sudden uproar. There was someone who had criticized the city's army. He was so scared that his face turned pale. He thought to himself, "This group of soldiers are all snakes and rats in a nest. I just cursed in front of their boss. I'm afraid I'm going to be unlucky." Many people had such thoughts and retreated into the crowd one after another. Shea stared at Green. He clenched his teeth and shouted, "Don't King talk about sparing me. Green, what kind of bullshit did you come here to do? If you don't give me a clear explanation, Lao Tzu won't care where you come from. He'll have your head chopped off by military law." Green saw that Shea's eyes were full of anger. It was clear that he was really going to kill him. He wasn't anxious at all. He smiled and said in a low voice, "This isn't the place to talk. Let's enter the city first and I'll tell you slowly." Green paused for a moment. He saw that Shea's expression was still full of hostility. He sighed and said, "Reckless kid, don't you believe in my character? Listen to me this time and I'll naturally explain to you later. When the time comes, if you want to beat me or kill me, it's up to you." Shea snorted. Although he was annoyed, he still had some expectations. Roar and Adrik both revered him so much. Moreover, with Green's character, how could he do such an unbearable thing? In the end, he was persuaded by Green. Green pulled Shea into the city and casually ordered a few of his subordinates to take over the job of guarding the city gate and maintain order. Shea took a few steps and suddenly stopped. He shouted, "Sharba!" Sharba immediately responded, "Lao Tzu is entering the city. You stay here and keep an eye on him." Shea said coldly, "Open your eyes wide and watch for me. If anyone dares to cause trouble here and ask for bribes, chop off their left hand if they're holding it with their left hand and right hand if they're holding it with their right hand. If anyone stirs up trouble, chop off their head and bring it to me." Sharba immediately straightened his body and responded. He pulled out his sword and stood at the door. He was originally tall and sturdy. When he stood there, he looked like a door god. After Shea finished speaking, his murderous eyes swept over the soldiers under Green's command. Everyone was immediately afraid. Requesting votes, requesting votes, requesting votes. To be continued. If you want to know what happened, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 183. GOR Chapter 172. Return to Wildfire Town. Shea was feeling unhappy. Even when Green came forward to hug his shoulder, he deliberately avoided him. He mounted his horse and coldly said, "Let's go." Green smiled and led his men forward to lead the way. Together, they entered the city. Along the way, Shea was in a bad mood. He was no longer in the mood to look at the scenery of the city. Finally, he followed Green and the others to the garrison hall. This place was originally the military headquarters of the war zone. After the war ended, the military headquarters retreated and this place was returned to the local garrison. When they arrived at the entrance of the garrison hall, they saw that the guards here barely looked like soldiers. They were fully equipped and the security was awe-inspiring. If nothing unexpected happened, This place would be Shea's official residence for the next few years. After entering the garrison hall, they rushed into the lobby. Shea immediately shouted, "Everyone, scram for Lao Tzu! Green, stay!" There were some military officers and soldiers from the garrison hall beside them. Some of them did not recognize Shea and thought that he was Green's guest. Seeing Shea's rude and unreasonable behavior, they were somewhat dissatisfied. Green sighed and forced out a smile. "All of you scram. This is the new military commander. You are not obeying orders. Do you want to die?" When those words came out, everyone's faces changed. They looked at Shea with fear and ran out like a swarm of bees. When there was no one left in the lobby, Shea could no longer sit still. He slapped the table and stood up. His hand pressed down on the handle of the fire fork on his waist. He stared at Green and coldly said, "Speak. If you cannot give me a reason, Lao Tzu will chop you up today." Green smiled. He looked at Shea's hand that was pressing down on the handle of the fire fork on his waist and smiled. "I believe you can do it. I also understand your current anger. If it were me, I would probably want to kill you too." After saying that, he waved his hand. "Be patient and wait for a while." He turned around and walked into the hall. After a while, he came back with a bulging leather pouch in his hand. He threw it on the table in front of Shea. Immediately, the sound of metal clanking could be heard from the leather pouch. Green took out a dagger and cut open the pouch. He saw that the pouch was filled with coins of all sizes. There were copper coins, silver coins, and even some gold coins. With so many coins in one bag, the amount was not small at all. Green then took out a book from his bosom and threw it in front of Shea. "What is it?" Shea snorted and finally looked up. "Accounts." Green smiled. "After I came here to take up my post, the old foundation of the local garrison army, old officers, some tried to rope me in, some tried to push me aside, some tried to bribe me, and some tried to attach themselves to me. How many bribes have I received in the past few days since I came here? How much have I received in total? How much have I pocketed with these military rats? How much have I pocketed? 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 Where the money came from, who sent it, who bribed, and who violated the law. You will understand in one glance. Shea stared blankly for a moment. He looked at the book on the table in front of him and subconsciously stretched out a finger. But then his heart was moved. He looked at Green with a straight face and snorted twice. He said in a neither yin nor yang tone, "You want to pass by handing over a book? Green, I can also see it as you plundering the oil and water. You wrote this account book in order to keep a trump card. Now that I am here, you can't deceive me. So you handed over this account book to me. You want to deceive me." Green stared blankly and stared at Shea with wide eyes. Then he laughed out loud and shook his head. "Ha ha ha ha. Good good good. Shea, you can be considered a lot more mature. You even know to guard against these things. Well, you have thought about it well. It can be considered thorough. If I only rely on this account book, it can't prove my innocence." Green laughed a few times. Then he restrained his laughter and said slowly with a serious expression, "Shea, you have to understand one thing. In this world, there is a rule of alienation between the old and the new. This rule is even worse in the army than in other places. Although you and I are appointed officials by the military, we don't have any foundation here. Secondly, we don't have much understanding of the old people in the army. You came here alone with a commission order. Humph, you don't know how fierce the old practice of bullying new people in the army is. If you rashly appoint a new superior to some extremely arrogant and proud soldiers and fierce generals, most of them won't be able to control the situation. Some of the more powerful ones can be casually set up by their subordinates and play the new superior to them to death. You and I came from afar. We don't have any spies or foundations in the local area. We also don't have the local power to support us. Among these guys, it is hard to guarantee that there are some unruly fellows who harbor ill intentions towards you. Shea snorted and said angrily, "If you meet these kinds of bastards, you can directly punish them with military law. Those who deserve to be beaten, you can beat them. Those who deserve to be killed, you can kill them. Don't tell me that Lao Tzu doesn't dare to kill people." Green shook his head. Killing people to establish power is one way, but the people below aren't fools. Since they have the intention to mess with you, they won't deliberately go hard on you. At most, they will incite the people below to cause trouble. When the time comes, the law can't punish the masses. Even if the military law is strict, you can't just behead all the people below, right? This is still considered light. The most frightening thing is that these veterans in the army have seen everything. Messing around with you in front of your face was nothing. What was most frightening was being respectful to you in front of your face but disobeying your orders behind your back. Humph, how could you know clearly if a person was brave and loyal to you in front of your face, but behind your back, whether he was a thief or a prostitute or a vicious person, how could you know clearly in such a short time? When you are about to show off your skills, the other party will give you a few small tricks. If you are not careful, you will be covered in dirt. You are a newcomer. How can you distinguish between good people and those who are loyal on the surface but are actually full of malice? Shea heard something and couldn't help but weaken the anger on his face. He looked at Green. "You mean, what I mean is very simple. If I act like I hate evil as if it is my enemy, I'm afraid that I won't be able to figure out the real situation below. I came to take office alone. I don't even have a reliable confidant by my side. If the people here have the intention to deceive me, my eyes will be covered and my ears blocked. I won't be able to figure out the real situation at all. Even if I wake up in the future, I'm afraid that I will have wasted a lot of time. Therefore, it is better to be straightforward, to defile myself. If I want these local bad guys to not be on guard against me, then I must first disguise myself as one of them." Green laughed bitterly. "These days I can be considered to have done a lot of bad things. As soon as I came here, I deliberately put on an appearance of being eager to fish for profit. When I first took office, the people below sent me bribes. I didn't refuse any of them and accepted them all. Only then did the people below breathe a sigh of relief and not guard against me too much." "There were bribes when you took office?" Shea frowned. "You're just a battalion officer. Who would give money to a small battalion officer like you?" If it was the Central Standing Army, naturally there wouldn't be any. But in this kind of place, the garrison army has long formed a set of hidden rules." Green became spirited and sat beside Shea. After talking for a while, his mouth was a little dry. He grabbed a water bottle on the table and drank it in one gulp. Then he slowly explained to Shea. "The moment I came here, I put on an expression of 'let's all earn money together.' Only then did I understand a lot of things. This Moore Prefecture's garrison military system is practically rotten to the core. Let's just talk about the empty military pay. It has almost formed a group of people who benefit from it, from a small captain to a big one like the previous military chief, as well as a group of officers in the prefecture's garrison, logistics, military supplies, etc. They are all covered equally. Let me explain it to you like this. More prefectures' full regiments should have 6 battalions. First, the officers in the logistics department should eat 1 battalion. This is the rule. The logistics department is responsible for distributing military supplies and military pay. The empty military pay can be hidden from others but not from them. Then the military law office eats 1 battalion. This is also the rule. The few battalion officers below eat one battalion's quota together. The flag bearer of the regiment eats one battalion alone. Calculating it this way, in fact, an emblem regiment only has 2 battalions. It's hard to say how much fighting power these 2 battalions have. Those soldiers here, you've seen it today. Many of them are unemployed local ruffians who were recruited nearby. These kind of people must have some kinship with the local officers. Or they might have simply taken the initiative to join them. They usually wear tiger skin and blackmail the local civilians. But going into battle? Then don't count on it. Shea felt a headache coming. The logistics department and the military law office are openly eating empty military pay? Of course. Green sneered. This is not the end. He sneered. The road to wealth is not limited to this. He continued to calculate. According to the Empire's military law, after enlisting in the army and becoming a local garrison, all taxes will be exempted. The local garrison doesn't need to fight in the first place. Usually, they just need to maintain the local law and order. They can even be exempted from taxes. They can also use the power of the tiger to plunder the land. Naturally, it has become a good job in the eyes of many. And the local garrison also sees this as a road to wealth. Want to enlist in the army? Easy. Just take out the money. The price of an ordinary soldier, a sergeant, and a team leader can be clearly marked. Your predecessor was even more ruthless. He even dared to sell the positions of the battalion officers under him. Every year when this sum of money is received, the people of the upper and lower system will sit down and share the spoils equally. This will form an interest group. One's glory, one's loss, all's loss. In this way, even if you want to beat these rats, you won't be able to do so. If you make it clear that you want to rectify the situation, they will shrink their heads. How do you know who is good and who is bad? Without a year and a half, you can forget about figuring it out. And in that year and a half, they will join forces and secretly set a few traps for you. They will make you suffer a few times. Who knows, you might even cause a big disaster and be transferred away. This kind of thing has happened in the army before. So you came up with this move? Shea nodded. Correct. Green nodded and smiled bitterly. You and I came here. Naturally, we are not here to eat and wait for death. Since we are here, we must do a good job. Then, the military of Moore County must be reorganized. In order to reorganize, we must first get to know the ins and outs of the situation here. In the upper and lower system, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? When I came, I pretended to be a greedy fellow. After a few probing attempts, I didn't refuse the money. That was how I was quickly accepted by them. You can say that I am part of the system. I also got to know the situation of the upper and lower system. As I collected the money, I also recorded everything down. Within the military system of Moore County, who are the bad guys, who are the ostracized ones? I have more or less remembered them all. I also deliberately allowed my subordinates to run amok, wantonly plundering the city. That was a blatant attempt to rake in the money. This way, the people below have no fear. Some of the fellows who were originally hiding have recently jumped out and raked in even more money. I have seen those fellows and remembered them. These rats have now come out of the water. After you come, we can pull in the net and catch them all in one go. Then, we will use thunderous means to reorganize the military affairs. We will strive to reorganize the military of Moore County in the shortest time possible. After that, you and I will be free to do big things. Good. Shea slapped the table. Besides, Green chuckled. A peculiar light flashed through his eyes. He sneered in a low voice. These rats have been raised until they are fat. Kill them all, they have raked in so many years of savings. Just nice to use it to enrich the military. I know the military budget is tight. You don't have much money in your hands. If you want to establish a qualified army, you will need to spend a lot of money. I know very well what the military budget of the county is like. Let these fellows jump around for now. They will rake in the money, but they will bear the infamy. When the time comes, you can sweep away the fallen leaves in the autumn wind and wipe them all out. First, you can use their wealth to enrich the military budget. Second, you can gain the popularity of the people. Hearing that, Shea was shocked. He stared at Green, a faint chill in his heart. Damn. This Green looks honest, but he is also a ruthless character. Green smiled slightly. He could see the fear in Shea's eyes. He slowly said, "Doing unusual things in unusual times is not the right way to do things. However, we want to do something. We have to fight every day, so we have no choice but to use some unconventional method. Using this kind of method to rake in money is really somewhat dishonest. However, there is no other choice." Damn. Not only did he get the money, he also got the popularity of the people. As for letting these rats take the blame, Green's move was really King beautiful. Shea secretly remembered it in his heart. It could be said that he had learned another skill. There is also a list here. The first few pages are the rotten worms of the county's military system. As for the last page, it is a list of people in the local army who have been ostracized by their peers. I think that since they have been ostracized by those worms, they must be upright people who do not want to wallow in the mire. I have secretly recorded the names of these people. After we have reorganized the military in the future, we can promote them one by one. You and I are not familiar with this place. If I don't play this hand, I don't know how much trouble I will have to go through. After this conversation, Shea no longer had any ill feelings in his heart. He bowed deeply to Green and said with a straight face, "General Green, thank you very much. I didn't know the situation just now and was impolite to you. And I am an ignorant kid. If you are angry in your heart, feel free to fiercely scold me a few times. If that is still not enough to vent your anger, feel free to punch me a few times." Green laughed out loud and looked at Shea. He slowly said, "You and I hit it off at first sight. Although our friendship is not deep, it can be considered a sincere friendship. In the future, don't call me General Green anymore. From now on, I will only be a battalion officer under your command. Ranks in the army are awe-inspiring and pay particular attention to order from top to bottom. You absolutely cannot call me that again. As for angering you, I naturally won't. You abhor evil as if it is your enemy. I am very happy in my heart. If you, Shea, were not such a person, Lao Tzu would not have followed you. As for hitting you, I don't dare." Shea smiled. His honest and straightforward face revealed a trace of craftiness. "I also know that you don't dare to hit me." Then the two laughed out loud and sat down to discuss in detail for a while. In the future, how to reorganize the army, how to close the net, how to revitalize the military affairs. They made a detailed plan. In the end, Shea frowned and said, "Getting rid of these rats is easy. Just catch them and cut them down. But after the fight, there will be so many empty places. Where am I going to find so many people? Also, this reorganization of the army. In the future, in my territory, there will naturally be no empty places. If I want to fill up the army, where will I go to recruit soldiers? The original local garrison troops are rotten to the core. I am afraid that after we fight, there will be no one left. If I want to pull the army up, first of all, I need a few shelves. At the very least, I need a group of veterans to fill in the skeleton. Then, both of them had worked in the elite troops and knew the importance of veterans. But where were they going to find veterans now? Shea thought of the garrison troop leader in the small village that they had passed by on their way here. He said, "There seemed to be some retired veterans in the local area. On the way here, I met a garrison troop leader in the village. He used to be a member of Ruhr's 6th Corps. He seemed to be somewhat decent, but he was a little older and also injured. Alas, according to the Empire's military law, these retired veterans are either too old or disabled. They can't be used anymore. Green smiled. You are too impatient. You can't be too impatient to pull up an army. I also didn't think about pulling up an emblem group. My idea is to get the best out of them first. First, we can get a small number of elites and form a battalion. We will train them well. When they are trained, we will pull them out. This place is located at the border. To the north is the Wildfire Plains, and there are many mounted bandits and robber groups nearby. If we send our troops out to exterminate the bandits, fight a few battles, and see blood on the battlefield, we will be considered to have formed an initial army. With a battalion as the foundation, we can choose the outstanding ones to become low-ranking officers. We will build a framework and recruit more soldiers. This will be the foundation of an emblem group. I think this process will take at least a year. This is only the first step. The second step is to gather the rebuilt army in one place so that it's convenient for them to train. Then, from time to time, they will be pulled out for a small battle to let the new army see some blood. Since this is the border, if it really doesn't work, we can pull the troops to the Wildfire Plains to fight those black tribe group. If we defeat one, we can even seize a lot of spoils of war to replenish the military budget. This can be considered as using battle to support battle. In this way, in another year, this emblem group can be considered as veteran soldiers. Even if there is a real war in the future, they can still barely be pulled to the front line and won't collapse the moment they enter the battlefield. 2 years, Shaya sighed. Although he also knows that this kind of thing can't be rushed, after all, he is used to seeing elites like the Roadrear Cavalry Regiment. Now that he is leading the army, the young man's heart is naturally impatient. He can't wait to immediately have an outstanding elite army. However, he also understood that this matter couldn't be rushed. 2 years was only enough to familiarize the army. It was still far from being an elite troop like the Rhodian Cavalry Regiment. The two of them discussed for a long time before Green left. Shaya was officially stationed at the garrison. When he, the newly appointed military officer, arrived, there were immediately many local garrison army officials who came to see him, but Shaya and Green had already discussed the plan. The first thing he did was to announce that he was tired from the long journey and would not see any guests for the time being. After that, he dismissed all the old servants and odd-job workers in the garrison. Not a single one was left behind. He also didn't check the military documents, roster, military supplies, inventory, and so on left behind by the previous garrison mansion's officials. Originally, all the officials in the garrison mansion were feeling uneasy. Today, Shaya's actions at the city gate had caused this group of vermin to be somewhat worried. They were afraid that this new military officer was an unreasonable guy. In the future, everyone's road to wealth would be somewhat dangerous. After arriving, Shaya closed the doors and refused to see any guests. He did not even bother to look at the fake account books that they had prepared. This caused these people to feel even more apprehensive. Over the course of the night, the soldiers in Denzel City had secretly gathered together to discuss how to deal with their new superior. In the end, they came to a consensus. First, they would use money to pave the way. If this superior was willing to accept money, then things would be easier. If not, then it would mean that he was here to stir up trouble. In that case, there would be no need to be polite. They would secretly set him up and let him have a taste of his own medicine. The next day, the battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion of the Moor Prefecture's local garrison emblem regiment, who had been in the Moor Prefecture's local garrison army for many years, came to the garrison mansion to see Shaya in the name of paying a visit to the commanding officer. At the same time, he brought along 2 attendants and drove a carriage. The carriage was fully prepared with gifts, and naturally, there were some yellow and white items mixed in. This time, in order to welcome this new officer, the garrison troops of Moor had to spend a lot of money. This sum of money was not small. However, when everyone thought of spending money to buy years of peace, no one objected. If they could get Shea to be their new superior, then everyone would continue to be rich for many years to come. As for the money spent, there would come a time when they could earn it back. In the end, the battalion commander went to visit Sir Shea. After arriving at the garrison, not long after, Shea came out and replied on behalf of Todoro, saying that the military chief was tired from the journey and could not meet any guests. He could only pass on a message saying, "Thank you for your kind intentions." However, even though they didn't see him, Master Shea didn't refuse the gifts and money that were sent to him. He accepted them without hesitation. It was said that the attendant of Sir Shea, the servant named Todoro, was very polite and said that Sir Shea was very happy. Although this answer made everyone somewhat suspicious, it also made them feel much more relieved. No matter what, if he was willing to accept the money, then there was still room for negotiation. However, he closed the door and refused to meet him. Could it be that we gave too little money? This group of people once again gathered in secret to discuss. In the end, everyone came to a decision. Since the money was too little, then give more. In the end, everyone came to an agreement. They might as well take out a year's worth of profits and smash this superior down in one go. As long as everyone could maintain the current situation, their positions would still be there. They would still be in the army in the future. Taking advantage of their position, embezzling military supplies and military equipment, reselling military rations, taking control of the city's defense checkpoints, and making a fortune from those passing merchant groups' money, they would be able to earn it back. In the end, that night, the same battalion commander came with 2 attendants to pay a visit. However, this time, the bribe he gave out was worth a total of 5,000 gold coins. Sure enough, the effect was seen after throwing out this sum of money. It was said that the moment this battalion commander delivered the gifts, he stood outside the door for less than half an hour. Todoro's servant came out with a face full of smiles and warmly invited him into the garrison residence, saying that Sir Shea wanted to see him. That battalion commander finally met with Shea. It was said that he even sat down and chatted for a while. This Sir Shea was not as difficult to deal with as expected. He was boorish and forthright, and from the looks of it, he did not seem to be a scheming person. It was obvious that he was very happy after taking the money. He had a good chat with the battalion commander and asked about some matters regarding the local military. It was all bureaucratic pleasantries. When he was about to leave, he politely escorted him out. He also said that he had just arrived at Moore County and needed the support of the local veterans in order to stabilize the situation. When this news came back, everyone in the local garrison army system heaved a sigh of relief. This time, the people below heard the news and acted immediately. Since this sir had heaved a sigh of relief, the next morning, all the passers-by came to seek an audience. However, they all came empty-handed. However, Sir Shea was nowhere to be seen in the garrison mansion. He only left a message saying that he left the garrison mansion early this morning with 3 of His Excellency's personal attendants. Later, he received news from the city gate that His Excellency had left the city when the city gate had just opened. He heard that His Excellency had gone in the direction of Wildfire Town. Shea brought Todoro, Philip and Sharba with him and galloped all the way north. They quickly crossed the border and entered the Wildfire Plains region. This time, they had truly returned to their hometown. Shea looked at the flat wilderness around him and felt happy. He could not help but shout a few times on the horse. This time, the few of them were fully prepared for this trip. Each of them had 2 horses and brought a lot of money and equipment. They galloped all the way north toward Wildfire Town. Since he had made a plan with Green to first let those vermin in the local garrison army of Moore County jump around and wait for all the fish to surface before reeling in the net, then he might as well take the opportunity to leave for a few days. During this time, He would take Todoro to the Zaku native tribe in the Wildfire Plains to look for the magic kiss Taro. He would settle this most important matter first. After he went there, it was almost time to reel in the net. Wildfire Town was not far from Denzel City. If they rode fast, they would reach it in a day. The few of them left early in the morning and did not stop on the road. They camped in the wilderness at night. At noon the next day, they could see the walls of Wildfire Town from afar. Seeing the mottled walls of Wildfire Town again, Shea's heart warmed at the sight of them. They were made of bricks made from the red earth that was unique to Wildfire Town. On the other hand, Theodore, who was at the side, sighed. What a pitiful magician! His tragic fate, if we were to talk about it in detail, happened to start here. Right from the moment he met Xiaya, the four of them galloped all the way to the walls of Wildfire Town. After the previous battle, the Byzantine army retreated and Wildfire Town returned to a state of anarchy. Because the battle had just ended, there were no mercenary groups occupying this place. Therefore, during this period of time, Wildfire Town could be considered to be without a mayor. When Shea's group arrived and saw that there were no soldiers collecting the gate tax, Shea smiled. He thought back to when he started here. He had paid the gate tax with his last copper coin. He was penniless. Fortunately, he met Todoro and snatched his robe, selling it for some money. When they arrived at the city gates of Wildfire Town, it was clear that after the great battle, this place had regained its former prosperity. Below the city gates, there were many caravans passing by, as well as some people who looked like mercenaries and warriors with weapons entering and leaving in an orderly manner. Shea's group slowed down and prepared to follow the flow of people into the city. Suddenly, a thunderous voice rang out from the side. That voice seemed to be filled with boundless excitement. A green figure suddenly leapt out from the side of the road like a leopard. It jumped in front of Shea's horse and hugged its head. A large, green, bald head shook. The tall and sturdy body almost knocked Shea off his horse. Okie oak. You. I've finally waited for you. Wife. I want a wife. Give me back my wife. I'm vomiting blood begging for votes. Sky Attack makes a grand appearance again. This goblin wants a wife. Little 5, as for me. Okie oak. I want votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 184. GOR Chapter 173. Sky Attack's tragedy. He had a bald forehead, and his green skin was covered with sweat and dust. His pair of bean-sized eyes were filled with eagerness and excitement, especially his chin, which was covered with a circle of light reddish-brown hair. He had a beard. Sky Attack. Without a doubt, this was Sky Attack. He was the infatuated gnome lord who traveled thousands of miles to find his wife, the one who created a new generation of gnomes. At present, what shocked Shea was Sky Attack's appearance. The brave gnome who used to be more muscular than a human was now so skinny that even his chin was sharp. His pair of mung bean-sized eyes were deeply sunken in, and there were faint dark circles around his eyes. Even more pitiful was Sky Attack's attire. Shea remembered the last time he saw Sky Attack was when he was caught trying to protect that damned rabbit Bonfreet. At that time, Sky Attack was under the care of Sharba and the others. At that time, Sky Attack was wearing the attire of a Rodrian cavalry. Although it was not gorgeous, it was still the attire of an elite cavalry of the human empire. Additionally, Sky Attack was considered to be one of the tallest among the gnomes. Wearing the cavalry armor made him look even more powerful. Carrying a large iron staff, he roared like a small bull. At this moment, Sky Attack was obviously covered in dust. He was wearing a tattered armor. Almost all of the metal plates had been stripped off, and the inner lining of the armor was also in tatters. He had cut a hole in a gunny sack and used it as a pair of pants. However, it was too short and exposed his 2 furry calves. The huge goblin still had boots on his feet, but there was only one left. Moreover, the toes had been worn through long ago. Poor Skyatak's face looked like it was emaciated. His originally plump cheeks had sunken in. Who knows how long he had been starving? His current appearance, how did he resemble the majestic gnome lord who roamed the red wilderness? The fierce gnome who even dared to face Hastings with his iron staff? He looked just like a beggar from Wildfire Town. Shea was sitting on his horse when Skyfall pounced on him and grabbed his calf. Skyfall's eyes immediately turned red and tears welled up in his eyes. Suddenly, the goblin burst into tears. His cries shocked the world and made ghosts and gods weep, just like Kylie in a slaughterhouse. His ghostly cries immediately startled the crowd in the surrounding city gate. Even Shea was almost pulled down from his horse by the goblin. "Let go!" Shea sighed helplessly. Skyatak tightly held onto his calf and wiped his snot on Shea's expensive silk trousers. He shouted desperately, "Wife! Give it back! Go, no! Don't! Legs yours! Ski Sky! No! You Shisky! Head yours Ski Sky!" Shea had to listen to such a messy half-threatening, half-pleading cry 3 times before he understood. He quickly wiped the sweat off his forehead and smiled bitterly. He jumped down from his horse and pulled Skyatak up. He sized him up and sighed, "Poor guy. You seem to have suffered a lot." Before he could finish his sentence, as if it was a coincidence, Skyatak's shriveled stomach let out a rumbling sound, as if thunder had struck. Shea smiled when he heard this. Seeing Skyatak's face full of shame and anger and his eyes glaring at Shea finally sighed and said, "Let's go. Since I've met you, let's not talk about anything else. Finding a place to eat is more important." With that, he grabbed Skyatak's arm and pulled him into the city. He didn't know how much this goblin had suffered. Originally, as a goblin lord, even though he was fierce and brutal, but in Shea's opinion, he was much stronger than other goblins in one point. Skyatak at least had the habit of bathing. Most goblins didn't have the habit of bathing. Even in the barren language of the goblin race, there wasn't the word bathing. Imagine a bunch of goblins who didn't bathe all day. They ate, drank, pooped, wore tattered clothes, and emitted a dizzying stench. But ever since he met Skyatak, this goblin lord seemed to be very particular about personal hygiene. But at this moment, as he followed beside Skyatak, he could smell a sour stench coming from this fellow's body. His clothes were so dirty that it was almost impossible to tell its original color. Along the way, he brought Skyatak into the city. Along the way, the pedestrians covered their noses and quickly moved away. There were also some people in the town who pointed at Skyatak and laughed as they talked about something. Shea directly led Skyatak into a roadside restaurant. He didn't care about the frowning and disgusted expression of the owner. He slapped a gold coin on the table and said, "Get some food. Get more meat and flatbread. Also, get a barrel of ale." Seeing the gold coin, the restaurant owner's expression became much better. He quickly collected the money and soon a waiter came in with food. When Skyatak saw the flatbread and barbecued meat on the table, his eyes suddenly glowed with a green light. It really was a green light. The glint in his eyes when he stared at the food was just like the hungry wolf that Shea had met in the mountains. The goblin roared and grabbed the wooden barrel. He didn't even use a cup as he raised his head and gulped down half of the wine. The wine flowed down his neck and shoulders. This wasn't drinking wine, it was simply taking a bath. After gulping down half of the barrel, the goblin threw the barrel away. He grabbed 3 pancakes in one hand and a pig trotter in the other. Using both hands, he began to gobble up the food on the table. A third of the food on the table was gone in an instant. When the waiter in the restaurant brought a pot of hot tomato beef noodle soup, Skyatak snatched it. His ferocious look scared the waiter so much that he sat on the ground. Sky Attack was scalded by the hot soup and screamed, but it didn't stop him from pouring the entire pot of noodle soup into his stomach. There were other customers in the surrounding restaurants. When they saw the tsunami-like scene at the table, many of them stopped eating and chatting. They stretched their necks and opened their eyes wide to look at them. Finally, Sky Attack put down the pot. He patted his bulging belly and burped loudly. Shea asked sympathetically, "How long have you been hungry?" After Sky Attack was full, his eyes became much brighter. Suddenly, a fierce glint flashed in his eyes. He jumped up with a shout, grabbed the chair under his butt, and smashed it at Shea's face. "What the hell?" Shea was shocked and raised his arm to block. With a crash, the chair shattered. Shea's arms were in pain from the smash. The wood chips almost pierced his eyes. Shea took 2 steps back and shouted, "Hey, are you crazy? Liar. Human. Ski Sky. You. Ski Sky. Liar." Sky Attack's roar was full of grief and anger. Seeing that the chair had shattered, he went to lift the table. Sharba had already hugged Sky Attack from behind. Philip pulled out his sword and pointed it at Sky Attack's throat. Todoro was so scared that he fell backward. Shea looked at Sky Attack's grief and anger and couldn't help but sigh. He raised his hand to signal Sharba to let go of him and Philip to put away his sword. Then he smiled bitterly and said, "Let's just say that I'm sorry." Liar. Human. Liar. Sky Attack was furious, but when he looked around, he found that he had no weapons. The heavy iron rod he used to use was long gone. He simply raised his 2 fists and pounced at Shea. Shea saw that Sky Attack's footsteps were weak and didn't fight back. He stepped aside slightly, and Sky Attack fell on the table next to him. Immediately, soup and dishes splashed all over him. Shea walked over and angrily picked him up. Seeing that Sky Attack was about to fly into a rage, Shea didn't dodge. He just stared and shouted, "Do you still want me to take you to Oaks?" This sentence was more effective than anything else. Sky Attack's fist was just a few inches away from Shea's nose when he suddenly froze. He rolled his eyes and finally put down his arm. He sighed and said, "I want a wife." Shea smiled and pulled Sky Attack up again. He then summoned the restaurant owner and asked him to bring in a new table and food. They sat down and ate again. This was Wildfire Town, where there were no laws and no morals. Fighting in restaurants like this was extremely common, so the owner wasn't surprised. As long as Shea agreed to pay for the things he broke, he wouldn't mind even if he tore down the restaurant. The diners around them were also used to seeing fights like this. Originally, there were still people who craned their necks to watch the show, but when they saw that the fight was over, they all shrunk back and continued eating. After they sat down again, Tiangong began to talk about what happened after they parted ways with tears and snot. When Shea was captured, before he left, he secretly asked Sharba and the others to take care of Sky Attack, who was recuperating at the time. Sharba was loyal to him and brought back Sky Attack, who hadn't recovered from his injuries yet. However, Shea was locked up for so many days without any news. After Sky Attack recovered from his injuries, he temporarily stayed at a place not far from the Rhodian cavalry regiment's encampment. Every day, when he was free, he would pester Sharba and the others to ask when Shea would come back. At that time, everyone was worried about Shea's safety and was already in a bad mood. When Sky Attack forced them to panic, they couldn't answer him. However, Sky Attack was a rash person and didn't understand the twists and turns of the human world. He only felt that these humans were all cunning and unpredictable, as if they were all trying to deceive him. Sky Attack was a stubborn person, so he decided to run away quietly. He ran back to Wildfire Town alone to look for Shea. Shea had been taken away by the soldiers in Wildfire Town. He was a one-track-minded person and held back his anger. When he came to Wildfire Town, he naturally couldn't find Shea. Of course, he couldn't find him. At that time, Shea had already followed the rabbit General Roar to the imperial capital. However, Sky Attack was extremely infatuated and refused to return to the Red Wilderness to be his lord. He gave up on being the leader of the goblins and insisted on staying in Wildfire Town. Can't find you? Fine. Lao Tzu will wait. I'll wait for you to come back sooner or later. Sky Attack's infatuation was unparalleled, and he continued to waste time in Wildfire Town. However, he was a goblin and couldn't speak the human language. Although he still had a few copper coins on him, after 2 meals, they were all gone and he quickly fell into a difficult situation. The problem of accommodation was easy to solve. After all, goblins were used to hard lives. Sky Attack had thick skin and flesh. When he rested, he simply wrapped himself in his outer clothes and huddled in a corner of the town wall to sleep for the night. However, while the problem of accommodation was easy to solve, the problem of feeding his stomach was troublesome. Even if he wasn't picky about food, he still needed to have something to eat. After spending all his money, the poor Sky Attack naturally thought of what goblins were best at: robbing. Robbing was an innate skill for every goblin. It was an instinct that didn't need to be taught. Sky Attack carried his large iron rod and hid on a remote path outside Wildfire Town for a day and a night. When he was dizzy from hunger, he finally waited for a passerby. But in the end, the pitiful goblin lord still miscalculated. Let's put it this way. What kind of place was Wildfire Town? There were no good people in Wildfire Town. As the largest human gathering point on the continent with no government, there were too many fugitives from various countries gathered here. There were also bandits who hid their identities and all kinds of criminals wanted by many countries. In the end, the first person that Sky Attack robbed seemed to be a white and clean fatso. He was dressed in rich clothes and seemed to be a small vendor in Wildfire Town. The pitiful goblin lord squatted in the grass for a long time and was bitten full by insects and ants. Only then did he yell out, "This mountain is mine." That was a common robbery phrase used by all races. But in the end, when he said this, the white fatso's expression changed. When he spat out the word mountain, Fat Antelope had already jumped up. By the time Sky Attack said yes, Fat Antelope had already run 20 steps away. When he finished yelling, this fatso had already run so far that not even his shadow could be seen. With that astonishing speed, not to mention a shadow, he left behind a trail of dust. It turned out that this white and fat fellow that Sky Attack had thought of as a fat sheep was actually a powerful bandit wanted by the Byzantine Empire for many years. His lightness skills were rarely seen on the continent, and his nickname was Shadowless Touching the Sky. Countless merchants had jointly offered a bounty for him. Over the years, who knew how many powerful mercenary groups had set their sights on him, but none of them could catch up to him. The second robbery took place on a slightly more crowded road. A carriage came from afar. The carriage was luxurious, and there must be a lot of money to be made. The goblin lord jumped into the middle of the road and shouted the usual slogan of the robbers. But in the end, when the carriage stopped, the coachman saw that they had encountered a bandit on the road, but he was not afraid. He sat in the carriage and sized up the goblin before mocking. "How many years has it been since we met a bandit who dared to rob us? I didn't expect to meet a goblin running here for the first time." Just as Sky Attack was about to speak, an old man walked out of the carriage. The old man was wearing a long robe and a pointy hood. Sky Attack couldn't see the old man's face clearly, but the golden badge pinned on the old man's chest was shining so brightly that it was dazzling. After all, Sky Attack was not an ordinary goblin. He was a goblin lord and naturally had some knowledge. When he saw the badge, he immediately realized that he was in for another tragedy. Sure enough, the other party chanted an incantation and a huge lightning bolt blasted the goblin lord into the wilderness by the roadside. Before he fainted, Sky Attack lamented in his heart, "Damn, I met a high-level mage, the third robbery. There was no third time." The two robberies took Sky Attack 2 days. He had been hungry for 2 days and felt dizzy. He couldn't even walk properly. Although the Gnome Lord was reckless, he also understood that he couldn't even lift his iron rod in his current state. If he really went to rob someone, it was hard to say who would be the one robbing whom. After thinking about it, the Goblin Lord, who was at his wits' end, could only return to Wildfire Town. He gritted his teeth and sold his iron rod to a blacksmith shop. That iron rod was made of the highest quality material, and was very heavy. The people in the blacksmith's shop were also bad. Seeing that he was a goblin, they bullied him for not knowing how to be an expert. The iron rod could have been sold for a gold coin, but they only gave him 6 copper coins. Poor Sky Attack took the 6 copper coins and exchanged them for a few pieces of flatbread. He gritted his teeth and survived for 3 days before running out of food again. However, he had the experience of selling the iron rod before. In the end, he remembered that if he could sell the iron rod, then he could also sell Lao Tzu's armor. The armor he was wearing was a standard set of armor from the Rhodian Cavalry Regiment. The iron plates on it were all made of the highest quality materials, and the inner lining was made of the highest quality cowhide. The cost of making such an armor was 1 gold coin. This armor had always been Sky Attack's favorite. Although he was a Goblin Lord, he had never worn such high-quality armor made by humans before he met Shea. After feeling the pain for a long time, Sky Attack finally could not fight against the rumbling in his stomach. He gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, making up his mind. However, this time, Sky Attack was smarter. He came up with a genius idea. There were so many iron plates on the armor. He could just take them apart and sell them. When he needed them, he could sell 1 or 2 pieces. As long as it could last for a few days, he might be able to wait until Shea came back. In this way, although the armor would lose a few iron plates, it would still be better than losing the entire armor. The poor goblin was even more of a country bumpkin than a country bumpkin. The armor was sold because of the craftsmanship. He took a complete set of armor apart and sold 1 piece today, and another the next. However, he only managed to sell them at the price of scrap metal. However, the heavy armor still weighed a few kilograms. He managed to survive for a few more days by selling this armor. In the end, all the iron plates on the armor were sold. Only the base was left. The poor goblin once again faced the problem of hunger. This time, after staying in Wildfire Town for so many days, he finally found a good way to make a living: begging. To a goblin, he did not understand what begging meant at all. He only saw a group of people dressed in tattered clothes similar to his. They squatted at the corners of the roads and city gates every day, shouting all the way. Soon, a passerby would casually throw 1 or 2 copper coins to them. The goblin felt great. So it was so easy to earn money. Good, I'll do the same. He immediately found the busiest intersection after entering the city gates and squatted there. He took out a broken bowl he had picked up from a pile of trash and placed it in front of him. As expected, money came. After all, there were many beggars in Wildfire Town. But damn, even if you were a knowledgeable person, have you ever seen a goblin begging on the streets? Such a new and interesting thing naturally attracted many passers-by. Those passers-by found it novel, and some of the more generous ones casually tip. In less than half a day, the broken bowl in front of Sky Attack was filled to the brim with copper coins. Sky Attack was feeling great, but he did not know that he had already attracted trouble. It turned out that wherever there were people in this world, there would be dispute. There were no good people in Wildfire Town. Even these beggars were freely organized. The money they earned from begging every day would be divided equally by the leader when they returned at night. This way, all the beggars would have food to eat. Sky Attack's begging took up the best spot on the street and attracted the attention of many passers-by. The reason was that simple. There were only so many passers-by in the town. If everyone gave their spare money to this goblin, then the other beggars could only starve. How could this be? How dare they steal the business of the great Wildfire Town beggar group? In the end, Skyattack received a large bowl of copper coins, but before he could buy anything to eat, he was surrounded by a group of beggars as soon as he reached the end of the street. If it was in the past, with Skyattack's ability, would he be afraid of these bumpkins? But at this time, he had been starving for so many days that his legs felt like they were floating. He had not eaten any meat for many days and could only eat 2 bites of flatbread every day. His stomach had not seen any oil for so many days and his body was as soft as a ball of cotton. He also did not have a suitable metal rod as a weapon. In the end, the most tragic thing in the world happened. The great Goblin Lord Skyattack, the Goblin powerhouse who had once faced off against Odin and war god Hastings, Lord Skyattack, had been beaten up by a group of beggars. On this day, the people of Wildfire Town saw an interesting scene. A goblin was chased around the town by a group of beggars. There were many beggars in this town, and there were at least 100 of them who were strong. Moreover, they were fighting on their own land and were familiar with the road. In the end, they blocked Skyattack in an alley and beat him up, leaving the great Goblin Lord with bruises all over his head. Before he left, the heartless leader of the beggar group saw that the pants that Skyattack was wearing were made by the military and were made of good material. He actually took off Skyattack's pants and took them away. Pitiful Skyattack's last chance of survival was cut off. After stumbling to his feet, he walked around the town naked for a day and finally found a tattered sack. He pierced through it and put it on. It was barely enough to replace his pants. He was truly at his wits' end now. The beggar group in the city saw him as an enemy and he could not even beg. If he dared to beg on the streets again, he would be beaten up. Skyattack felt bitter and depressed. He thought of how he was surrounded by people at home and how his might shook the red wilderness. Now that he was in such dire straits, he could not help but feel sad. If it were anyone else, they would simply leave and go home. As long as he returned to the tribe, he would be a glorious lord again. But Skyattack was not like that. He became more and more stubborn, his heart filled with infatuation. He only wanted to find his wife. In the end, he gritted his teeth. Lao Tzu had suffered so much. If he went back without finding oaks, wouldn't it all be a waste? Not going back, definitely not going back. Probably because of this infatuation, the heavens were finally moved. Today, Tiangong was sitting at the base of the city wall outside the city gate, anxiously looking at the road ahead. Finally, Sheya's arrival. Sheya asked and found out that before he saw him, the pitiful goblin had been hungry for 3 days and had not eaten a single bite. Every day, he could only drink cold water from the well in the city. Finally, he was full. If he did not see him again, he was afraid that this powerful goblin who shook the red wilderness and once fought against Hastings would really starve to death in a place like Wildfire Town. Pitiful, really pitiful. Sheya also sighed and patted the goblin's shoulder. What do you want to eat? Tell me. Since you met me today, you can eat as much as you want in the future. Looking at the monthly votes list, I suddenly sighed with emotion. I am even more pitiful than Skyattack. Everyone, please tip me some monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.